after a 2-0 Jade Dragons win over the Valhalla Valkyries, we are back for our second set of the day, and there's electricity in the air going into this next set. And it's not because not because the Olympus Bolts are playing. It's because the computers that our pros are playing on are powered by electricity.
From the air.
From the air. And it just dissipates everywhere. But it all funnels into these top-of-the-line Alienware PCs that our pros are playing on, and you can play on at home as well. If you head on over to smitegame.com/Alienware and use code AWSMITE09, you can get select discounts on Alienware gear throughout this year as well. So thanks again to Alienware for being with us here in Season 9 of the SMITE Pro League and adding a little electricity into the air as we go into our next set, which, as I've mentioned, is Olympus Bolts up against the Solar Scarabs. Myth, you know, I think before we really dig into this one, I think you zoom out. We had a 2-0 to start the day. Feels like this one, because of one of the teams that's in it, almost guaranteed to go 3.
The Solar Scarabs have got a history of going to 3, so I suppose certainly have got that potential, but I don't know, man. I passed Jake on the way in here, and he was mean mugging. I have never once in my life seen Jake as serious as he was walking into the booth today. Maybe the Solar Scarabs might be looking at a 2-0-fer.
I wonder if you mean for the Scarabs or the Bolts. That's the question. Does it mean
mug
Jake a good thing or a bad thing? I'm not sure. We'll see what happens there, but we can look forward to the rest of the matchups that we've got this weekend as well. So, yesterday a couple 2-0s. We start off today with a 2-0. The Solar Scarabs and the Olympus Bolts looking to break that trend. And then into tomorrow, both the Scarabs and the Valkyries will be back. But then the Oni Warriors, the Kings, the Titans, and the Leviathans, who all played on Friday, will rejoin us and play a few matchups on Sunday. As always, our triple header of SPL action kicks off at 11 a.m. Eastern time tomorrow, starting with the Oni Warriors and the Solar Scarabs. Now, as we move into the second phase, Myth, you know, phase 1, everyone played each other once, so the standings all pretty closely knit, one win here or there. Still very close between 2 and 6. Camelot Kings buying some separation towards the top. So still one win separating a lot of these teams in the middle of the pack. Important for the Bolts, though, to grab a win here of the Scarabs, stay within striking distance of the Kings.
Yeah, anytime one of these top seeds is matched up against the bottom, it is an interesting dynamic of that's probably when the pressure is most on.
Yeah.
You drop a game up against the Leviathans of the Olympus Bolts, and you're like, well, they're right next to us, okay? The Leviathans can beat just about anybody, and that's not to say the Scarabs aren't capable of that as well, but so far this phase, they really haven't. So a must-win here for the Olympus Bolts if they want to maintain their near-the-top standings.
The Olympus Bolts, Smith, remember, undefeated until they ran into the Leviathans during the first half of our second phase. And the Olympus Bolts have been playing some really good Smite this year. This is a squad that a couple of years ago, as the Renegades, just couldn't put it together on a consistent basis, make some changes going into Season 8, find their footing, have one of the longest win streaks in Smite Pro history throughout the course of the year last year. And a couple of the individual members that have stepped up on this team had huge success in the past in their career and have started to play some of that style of Smite again. And I think Venenu really comes to mind when I think about that, because between Season 7, Season 8, not Ven's best. Absolutely not bad in Season 8 specifically. But here in Season 9 has really picked up the pace. Oftentimes will go undying in a lot of these games. It feels like a real spearhead for this Bolts roster.
And a very dynamic player at that. He's capable of playing things like the Morrigan, will go towards the Hell if need be. Otherwise, has got the standard mage lineup, the usual suspects very much so within his god pool. Even at times going towards ADCs. In the last couple matches, we've seen a bit of that on Muzen Cobb. Otherwise, Yu Huang been one that has served him very, very well. So that dynamicism around Ven isn't just there. It's everywhere for the Olympus Bolts. Maybe you've got a Guardian out of support, or maybe it's going to be your Chronos Pendant Nox support again. And that makes it very difficult to lock this team down. And even besides that, let's say they're going into an even state with a standard composition. The Olympus Bolts have very quickly become one of my favorite teams in the team fight phase.
Yep.
It just feels like they have got an answer for almost every situation.
They do seem like they do have that, Myth, and it's the style of squad. Again, if you're looking at Ven and his play style, I'm assuming he's looking at his highlights right now.
Guys, look at that.
Guys,
I'm popping off.
I got some kills. Ven has, in 3 of the last 6 games, so 50% of the games he's played in the last few sets, he's gone undying. 4-0, 4-0, 3-0. a 4-5 loss against the Camelot Kings, but who's beating them nowadays? Not many teams, if any, in the SPL. And so to step up against Ven is a tall task, Myth. But honestly, I think similar storylines for the Solar Scarabs, because a team that has had their fair share of struggles, they've consistently gone to 3 games. We've talked about that ad nauseum. It's a team that has shown improvement. And I think it's a similar outcome, but a different story, because when this roster formed, it was a bunch of newcomers to the SPL. It was Inbowned. It was BaRRaCCuDDa joining this squad. It was Layers from the console team. Remember when that whole team was together? So it's about improving as an SPL player for BaRRaCCuDDa rather than rewinding the clock a bit to some of his best years, as we've talked about with other players. And I think BaRRaCCuDDa has started playing some SPL caliber SMITE, and he's been doing it on a consistent basis. I think he has arrived.
Yeah, as far as KDA, average damage, GPM, a good deal of parallels between BaRRaCCuDDa and Ven as well. But I would argue God Pool is completely different between these two. And even if you just were to take a peek at the last 6 games between these two players, the only carryover is the Muzen Cobb. We've seen BaRRaCCuDDa play it once in his last 6, twice for Ven. So I'm expecting maybe last picks for these mid laners, as you're not so concerned about your God Pool getting targeted out too often. Otherwise, though, if we wanted to see a recency bias for BaRRaCCuDDa, most recently we saw an 8-0-13 performance from his Kukulkan. I believe it was this match. We were watching these clips. A very greedy build, double stack, Bumba's Hammer a little bit later on, but he was navigating those engagements so incredibly well, always putting himself in a position to follow up, always ready and just outside the range of the dive of whoever he was lining up against. BaRRaCCuDDa has very quickly found his own style in the mid lane, and the Solar Scarabs are looking a lot better for it. It used to be this team was, hey, let's talk about Scream and let's talk about Stuart. I think BaRRaCCuDDa has been stepping up mightily, and maybe the conversation starts to revolve around him as the phase goes on.
I think there is still worthwhile conversation to have around Stuart. We will talk about Stuart here in a little bit, specifically around picks and bans. But I agree. Remember to zoom out again. The Solar. Are we zooming out a second time? I've zoomed out a whole lot. Let's zoom back in and then a slight zoom back out. We are fresh off of a Leviathan's win for the Solar Scarabs in a game number 3. So the Solar Scarabs have found their win. Can they build off that win? Can they find some momentum? All of these are important questions for the Solar Scarabs squad. And some of those questions we were able to ask BaRRaCCuDDa prior to this big matchup.
I feel like we have gotten a lot better drafting. I think that was one of our weaknesses. I think it costed us like a lot of games. So I think we've really improved in that area, and just map play too, I would say, is a lot better. And Bolts seem to have not changed too much from what I've seen. So, I mean, they're just playing standard meta, basically. Nothing too crazy. Playing around their mid-core, mostly Jake and LASBRA. I feel like with every patch there's like something new, so I think the season is probably some of the most diverse maybe in some ways. I don't know. I think it's, you have your standard warrior picks in jungle right now. I mean, other than that, you can go wild and play mages and ADC like we've seen some people do, or you know, nothing too crazy.
That is a trend we heard in a lot of the pre-game interviews this week, is players feeling like the meta has stabilized. Teams have sort of figured out their identity. Don't tell that to the Dragons or the Valks, I guess, because it was a bit of a dynamic in the picks and bans for our first set of the day. It does feel like teams have started to stabilize, though. It does feel like these squads, and honestly, to your point, Myth, between BaRRaCCuDDa, they've found their identity in the way that they like to play the game. And I do want to pivot away from the mid laners for just a moment. I said I want to talk about Stu. And I want to talk about BaRRaCCuDDa if we're going to look at the duo lane, because Stu really does pop off for this team. Feels like every other game, almost exactly for Stuart, is like a huge game. Game 3 against the Leviathan, 7-1. Game 1 against the Leviathan, 6-1. And then 0-3 against the Dragons. Then game 1 against the Dragons, 10-2. You know, it's like like every other game, you're just getting this ridiculous performance from Stu. Where on the flip side, very consistent 2, 3, 4 style kill games for BaRRaCCuDDa. So different dynamic over in the duo lane.
Yeah, when the Solar Scarabs are winning, Stuart is a major proponent of it. But in spite of that, it is very seldom that the Solar Scarabs legitimately decide to play through their duo lane. Watch the matches today or the upcoming matches this week. The Solar Scarabs love playing through that mid 3v3. At times, we'll see Scream and Scary D just kind of hang out over in the Soul lane. But it is incredibly rare that is a lot of emphasis put from the Solar Scarabs on helping Stuart through the laning phase. So even in those matches where he's popping off, the 7-1 on Hou Yi, the 10-2 on Jing Wei, both of those games started 0-1 for Stuart and 0-2 on the Jing Wei. And then he just has to survive that laning phase and eventually rotates through the team fight and starts to find some dominance. I believe it was Captain Twig who had made a fraud tier list. He put Stuart in the no-help category, and look, I gotta agree. It is rare that he gets the help he needs in lane.
I put myself in the no-help category on the,
Like on the
caster
casting
fraud tier list.
That's
yeah.
crazy. Who's like A tier fraud?
Like the most fraudulent
who's
on
the
the
most?
team?
Yeah. Oh, it's me, isn't it? You looked at me like it was me.
No.
No?
Our whole squad
No help.
leans on one another. Yeah, none of us have help. We all do. we all do it all on our own. No, none of us are frauds. We all lean on one another equally. As we do get into picks and bans for game number 1,
Wouldn't that make us
Cthulhu.
all frauds?
What?
Wouldn't that make us all frauds if we're all leaning on each other?
Yeah, I guess if that's the metric,
Yeah,
relying on.
we're just a fraudulent team.
I guess you're right. We all play off one another is what I'm trying to say, man.
Okay.
The Cthulhu and the Morrigan get banned. Obviously a strong pick in the Morrigan for Ven and for Haddix in the Cthulhu, but normally you ban out one or the other if it's that dual Cthulhu composition that you're very, very worried about. On the flip side, Erlong Shen, Chernabog, both taken off the table. I wonder what the Bolts end up going for third here. Because if you think about it, the Scarabs not a team that shy away from grabbing Stu something pretty comfortable early. Yeah, the Ullr really stands out to me.
Freya, maybe?
Freya,
Elegance
Olorun have been
and
very popular for
dangerous.
Stuart. Instead, it'll be an Inbowned Yemoja. First overall pick. 88% win rate on Yemoja across 16 games? That is unbelievable. I didn't expect it to be that high. I know Yemoja's good. But 88% win rate across 16 games. That is a hefty win rate.
And the conversation around Inbound in the past with this Yemoja was, maybe we shelved it, right? Like, it wasn't really performing tail end of Season 7, at portions of Season 8 as well. But very quickly, and I think it was just raw repetitions, he had played so much Yemoja that he is now really one of the better Yemojas in the league. He's very consistent with those riptides. His positioning has really improved. The ultimate's always just ready, especially around these objective fights. I'm remembering all these fire giant dances that I feel like are just separated by Inbound on this pick. So not only is it good for the entirety of the SPL, but I think certainly one that fits his god pool.
Wow, Xing Chen for the Olympus Bolts. Not something that Jake has been playing recently. Been a lot of Ymir, a lot of Sobek, a little bit of Nox. And so Xing Chen that has started to rise in the SPL. That said,
It's variety.
he's played, I'm thinking of, Jake has played Xing Chen with the Chronos Pendant build, I think, once or
Sure
twice.
has.
So definitely not something we haven't seen from Jake, but not the usual pick that we'll see out of support. But still a very strong pick, synergizes well with the Chronos Pendant style of build if that's where Jake wants to go. Raven adds some flexibility to the Bolts draft, something LASBRA would love to get active early on, and I think that's an important facet of the Olympus Bolts win condition is getting LASBRA active, but also for Haddix on the damage mitigation style build. Could absolutely be a value pick there. And then Eset. So the Solar Scarabs myth have drafted both carries and their support in the first few. Just waiting on some initiators on the back end.
Yeah, I really like how Yemoja and Eset synergize together. You essentially can throw up the walls and have a circle protection cover up nearly the entirety of that River's Rebuke, but even more important is how good this Solar Scarabs draft already is around the objective. Yemoja, deceptively, one of the best objective-based gods in the game just because of how well she's able to control that space. And I don't need to say it, but Circle Protection, just really, really good for confirmation and keeping you topped off towards the tail end. Like, let's say you get dropped to 50% by Gold Fear because it just has hands now. Heal it back up, you're getting mitigated the whole way through. It makes it difficult for the Bolts to want to fight in to that ability. So the Solar Scarabs have got themselves a composition that is very good in that neutral territory. On the other side, this is a high burst composition for the Bolts. Jing Shen has set up, immediately followed up by the Stinger from a Muzen Cobb. If Raven is slated for the jungle, we see a lot of Heartseeker, a lot of Titan's Bane. If we're going to go by the build we saw from Sanford Soccer, that Bumba's Hammer, essentially just flanked by every single burst item you can buy as an assassin, is really going to make it easy for the follow-up. Walk up as Jing Shen, root somebody, shred the defense from a Muzen Cobb, and then all of a sudden, you got a Raven there to finish off your kill.
I'm assuming it'll be AMC for Ven. That's where we've seen it most recently for the Bolts. BaRRaCCuDDa, not played it at all in the last few games. A lot of Jingwei for BaRRA. He laughs a bit about his Jingwei numbers over the years. Hundreds of competitive games on Jingwei.
Like 115, 114,
something like that. It's climbed a lot. 3 more of the last 6 games for BaRRA. So a lot of burst physical damage for the Olympus Bolts between the Robin and the AMC. And I think realizing that were the Solar Scarabs who take away both Freya and Olorun. I know you don't want to see a Kronos or anything like that, Myth.
I don't hate Soul.
Yeah, Soul. And Soul for BaRRaCCuDDa.
That's really good. That's history.
That's history. That is right up there. Unfortunately, I don't know how to work Gore spreadsheets here, but I'm sure Soul for BaRRaCCuDDa is a pretty storied pairing together. And so it won't end up being Xing Chen support for Awesome Jake. It'll be Xing Chen solo for Haddix, Khepri for Jake, Robin in the jungle for LASBRA, and then something for either Ven or BaRRA to end the draft. And how about this, Myth? Tsukuyomi, which took the league by storm last year in Season 8, now gets its first pick of the phase here in Phase 2 of Season 9 for the Solar Scarabs.
Only concern I have for Tsukuyomi into this composition from the Bolts is that very often we'll see that Piercing Moonlight, the ultimate from Tsukuyomi, used to secure kills. Hey, I'll chase him down, I'm targeting him, but it's telegraphed, incredibly telegraphed. Scarab's Blessing, pretty good at stopping that from happening. So, could be we see the Tsukuyomi more so just dedicate his time to dealing damage from a range, become that ranged poker, Kusari Gamma, mostly for a self-peel tool up against a Muzen Cobb. That disarm should find some value as well. But Tsukuyomi has fallen off a fair bit because of how high execution he is. You really want to get close range to use that second ability. Khepri not only makes it difficult to use that ultimate, but also makes it difficult to find those stuns. Abduct can stop you in your tracks. Overhead kick, avoid the stun. Jing Shen, multiple leaps as well. So I'm keeping my eyes on Tsuki. I feel like he's going to be the breaking point or contention point for this team. One where the Olympus Bolts can really look to exploit him inside of those team fights. Otherwise,
wow,
I really do like the Solar Scarabs draft. I feel like they've got themselves a clear strategy of let's roll through the objectives and then scale into the late.
And they want to roll towards the Bolts as well, between a Yemoja, a Tsukuyomi, a King Arthur. They want to turn out the lights and run at you when you can't see. And the Bolts will have to answer a question here. Not often you get to the final pick of the draft and there's still this much intrigue. So between the AMC, again, you would assume for Ven because we've seen a lot of it late. However, a Hell will answer up that question for us. So AMC for BaRRaCCuDDa, not something he has played much of recently. Adding the Hell into the composition, so you get double Guardian plus a Hell and an AMC for the Olympus Bolts. Maybe defending the carry is the name of the game.
And they've got a good composition for it. I mean, anytime Khepri's with you, you're going to have someone defended in the team fight. Feels like this Hell was a concession, though. I really think that Muzen Cobb was originally slated
like
to go towards
or a
mid.
Hamburger, or
no, like you give up something.
Oh,
like you give up a little space. You can cede a point.
So as a concession stand, I'm giving up money for food.
Yeah, I don't.
I'm conceding my money for.
Look, man. Let me do my. I don't
sorry,
know.
Go ahead. It feels like a concession. Actually, you're making a great point.
A concession stand? Yeah, why do they call it that?
You actually were making a really good point.
Oh, yeah, I mean, Magical Hunters.
Why does the Hell feel like a concession to you?
Yeah, it really felt like this Muzen Cobb was originally slated for mid, but you started to see some of these Magical Hunter bands come through. Your composition is lacking a bit in magical damage. You don't really want to go towards that Chronos if you can avoid it. Soul, a little bit more consistent, but still not one that has been at the top of the power rankings. So instead, you take the Hell for yourself, but if we were going to pivot the mid-mage, I would have expected maybe like a Merlin or something like that, some objective burn, and the ability to deal with the walls from Yemoja. Hell, sure, has got a whole lot of CC immunity, not only for herself, but the entirety of her team, but you can't CC immune through a River's Rebuke. That is just going to lock you down regardless, which could be a major contention point for the Bolts early on. With that said, though, Ven's very good at navigating the early game as Hell. We've seen him go for like double stack and still somehow make it through the early game without even dropping a single death. So I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt.
Now look, when we talk to the Solar Scarabs and watch the Scarabs team find advantages, find wins, they love playing in this early game, getting active, building up a lead, and then if they can ensure, and when they have been able to shore up that mid game and late game, that's when the Scarabs have been finding their wins. In Myth, I think they've got a draft that's okay at finding some value early on. A Tsukuyomi, the initiation potential, yes, telegraphed, but it's still there. You can't avoid it. from Scream on the Tsukuyomi. Do you think Scream can be the driving force early on for the Solar Scarabs team?
I mean, I think so. You've got good chase down potential. You should be able to apply your slows pretty consistently. On Muzen in particular, going to be very exploitable for Tsukuyomi. But we don't often see Scream make the rotation over towards the duo lane. We don't see that often from junglers in general because there's such a lack of farm for them. If the gank goes south, you really do start to fall behind. So I think it's a high-risk play to get to that high-priority target.
Well, Myth, the Bolts and the Solar Scarabs, a high-octane battle. Into game number 1 we go.
Thank you so much, Dave and Myth. It's J-Mac and Gore back off the desk and on the cast for the second set of the game to the Scarabs and the Olympus Bolts, our second match, I should say, game 1 of that one. And we got Doug sticking by with us. And we'll talk about this hell a little bit in the mid lane, because we've seen her popping up as of recent. When the 9.5 changes kind of came around, a couple of players were kind of talking a little bit about how healers might become, top of the meta for a little while, but we never really saw it. It really feels that only Ven and maybe Paul in the SPL are really going over towards this pick right now, Gore.
Yeah, it's been something that the Bolts, it's not uncommon for them, and like you said, Paul's been playing it a few times. The healing's still really good, although you are, I want to just say, still limited in terms of what you're going to be able to do, right? Season 8 and then Season 9 even more so kind of leaned into the anti-heal across the map so that, out-of-combat healing isn't anywhere near as good. In-combat healing is still just as powerful as it was, and that's where I think Hell can find a lot of power and prowess. She also has a lot of damage. That's one of the things I like, but what we've been seeing a lot, and I wouldn't be surprised if Vin does something similar. I think yesterday we saw the Thoth into a Warlock staff, and if not yesterday, then last week, and then the capabilities of, pivoting that into something like a breastplate, if you so please, or anything that you can have to give you power or give you a little bit of protections, things to keep you alive are good. Because I look at this Bolts draft and I see 2 Guardians, as David mentioned, the Hell with healing, and a Raven. So they're gonna be survivable throughout this game.
For sure. Potential gank to be had over on this right side. We've been seeing this a lot more often, Gore, where the junglers and the mids will split up now after the speed buff. Your mids will go and solo their respective waves. And then the jungler makes their rotation over for this first Totem of Ku. We've been seeing it a little bit more so in these last couple of weeks. And it's just been interesting to watch kind of the development of how this early start has changed up for the mids and jungles respectively.
Yeah, I honestly am really kind of anticipating what's going to happen, seeing the Tsukuyomi, because it's been something that's so, what feels like at this point rare. I mean, it was mentioned, but this is the first time in this phase, not the first time this year, but it's been a while since it's been played. And honestly, thinking back on it, I think the last time it was played, Pagon might have run it in mid, maybe not in the jungle.
Well, Scream in danger, eats a lot of damage, needs a couple more shots, but will not find it from Laz or from Ven. LASBRA does have Blink, though, so keep your eyes. And Scary D rotating over. Venenu might be the one to fall for first blood. Here, a knock-up and a slam down. It's Scream for first blood of the Scarabs.
That's just a good rotation from Scary D, man. There's no point at 2 minutes in that a mid laner is thinking there's going to be a solo lane rotation, whether Haddix hadn't called it out or if that was just the only pathing Vin thought he could take. Granted, there's not many options there, right? You either run backwards through the mid camps like he did, or you run into the lane where BaRRaCCuDDa and Scream were waiting for you. So that's a really, really good-looking first blood to be able to pick up. And you get a good rotation from the solo lane. Everybody on that side of the map gets a little bit of a boost for the Scarabs as well in terms of experience. And so you're starting to see small leads, but, a level 5 for an Eset, that's a big deal when you hit that mark, because that all of a sudden opens up some of these objectives. While we haven't seen any that are crazy early game anymore, I do still think that that's something that the Scarabs are going to be able to leverage. That plus getting a little bit of a lead over here for Scary D, getting a little lead in the jungle for Scream. That just feels like it's going to be a good success for the Scarabs.
And with that rotation, doesn't feel like Scary D's missed out on a whole lot of XP.
Oh, no,
maybe a couple of creeps in the wave that end up going over to the tower, but still boxing up against them, even in XP with Haddix, at least as far as what we can tell right away. Again, LASBRA rotates over for another Totem of Ku start up here. LASBRA has been keeping his sights over on the right side, and I think that alludes a little bit to what Mifflin was saying earlier, where junglers aren't as willing to make that rotation to the left side of the map anymore because of the lack of farm that would be there, because of how much the hunters are taking for themselves. And so we've been seeing so much more focus out of our junglers in this mid, or even more so often now over in the solo lane.
Yeah, and I mean, just look at the map. What if you're a jungler and you get a kill over here, what else are you getting? Or if you don't get a kill over here, what else are you getting? Harpies are going to be down, one super far on the left side of the map, so you're going to have to go even deeper into the lane in order to pick it up. Purple buff, well, that's going to the carry in the duo lane most of the time. There, again, their single Harpy goes over there. And before that, it was maybe that those kills or a kill would open up a Gold Fury for you. But considering how difficult it has been to take on a Gold Fury early on, yeah, that's not really your option. So, like, your fallback plan is maybe Oracles? Like, it's just not worthwhile to go over there. Versus on the other side where you have so much to work on.
Fight on the Scream. Uses the ultimate defensively in case there was something more coming from Laz or BaRRaCCuDDa. So that's beads and ult down now for the jungler of the Scarabs. ScaraDee pulling a little bit low on this right side. Haddix has been doing a good job of poking him out. No sustain yet to the King Arthur. Gank by LASBRA could be on the horizon. He'll walk up, see the blue has already been taken. Finds the root, but ScaraDee's got the movement to get himself out of the range of that one. So blue buff at least secured for the Scarab solo lane.
Yeah, I mean, being able to control your own jungle at this point, really good idea. You have first blood if you're Scream. So I'm going to keep my eyes on him to see when exactly he hits 6. Well, right now, actually. So still a comfortable lead over LASBRA and is able to secure not only his own farm, but honestly might be able to set up to start looking aggressively towards things like those greater scorpions. Very, very simple to kill, I think, early on. And while they're not like this massive shift in terms of what you're going to be getting, it still feels really good, especially if you swipe one away from the bolts here. So the Scarabs, I like the proactive play already. A little bit more of a slow start. You can see some stacking items picked up there in mid, and then a Transcendence there for Scream. So they aren't necessarily looking at immediately hitting hard. And, you know, you see Vin, no starter, straight into the Book of Thoth. Not necessarily like he's looking for a fight early either. That is going to be a big point of contention.
A lot of damage. Haddix finds ult on the BaRRaCCuDDa to get his beads, but BaRRaCCuDDa drops Circle of Protection, keep him through. River's Rebuke from Inbound. Will not be able to lock in Haddix. The leap available to the Xing Chen. So Haddix will find a way out. And all the damage that was just done to the bolts is being healed back up by Ven. But it's still a man advantage for the Scares. 4 versus 3. As Jake was a little late to the rotation over towards this fight, but nobody goes down. Most importantly, though, BaRRaCCuDDa beads were removed during that last fight. ScaraDee picks up Haddix, slams him down, 3v2. Haddix gets hit by the Piercing Moonlight, can leap a little bit of a way, but Scream may have gone a little further than he wanted to. The star gets blocked out, but ScaraDee has got the damage in the range to find the kill.
And luckily the healing right behind him inbound, making sure the team stays alive. And they get rid of Haddix here. Again, that is going to be a difficult kill to find any phase of this game. So getting it right now is very important for him. Try to get even more of a lead for ScaraDee. Set themselves up pretty successfully over here in solo. And ScaraDee, and you have to talk about this guy. Over years, again, back-to-back world champion, has done a lot. And I think brings a lot to this squad. But so far this year, sometimes you come in and you have a performance that you could think would hit a little harder. And sometimes you get exactly what you expect from someone with the tenure that they have. And I anticipate right now getting them off to a very, very good start. The Scarabs are definitely leaning much more towards a world champion kind of performance out of Scary. And with a King Arthur, I mean, he's already going to be bullying pretty hard, good dive, and good control. I expect some fun plays from ScaraDee as the game goes on.
We'll see how the rest of his build progresses. It seems like Glad Shield will be the next call for ScaraDee. So skipping out on that sovereignty for now. And talk about kind of change-ups in the build at least a little bit here. Inbound, we've been seeing the Chronos Pendant kind of pop up a few times for these support players, and namely Awesome Jake mostly going for that item. We've seen a couple of other supports start to mimic it, but Inbound has gone for something else, something that still gives him cooldown, and he's going to need some extra cooldowns to lock down BaRRaCCuDDa. Beads are gone, and Scream has the damage to take down the B. The Solar Scarabs up 3-0 to start this game. The lead itself hasn't gone too far, Gore. It's only about a 1K up for the Scarabs.
Yeah, there are some problems late game that the Scarabs are going to have to address that I think right now they're getting themselves off to a good start to deal with. That Tsukuyomi dive is going to be one of them. I think right now it's doing well, and it can continue to do well and pick up. But eventually, Scarabs, Blessing, Hell, the team kind of surrounding them, I think it's going to be a little more difficult for Scream to use this ult and to have the exact same kind of performance on it. But then again, if you get far enough ahead, it's not like anybody's going to be easily able to stop you. That Scarab's Blessing maybe is going to be the biggest deal. But we've seen already once this week, or maybe even twice this week, Scarab's Blessing isn't the end of a fight if it goes off. In fact, a lot of teams are really good at being patient, making sure they don't even proc it. So I have a lot of hopes for the Scarabs, especially with a start like this. I mean, this is a great way to kick things off. Good lead over the Bolts. They've got it in all the right places, specifically in the jungle and mid is where I would be like leaning on them a little heavier. Put down the AMC a little bit and make sure that that Stinger's not going to be as impactful as we've seen in some games. And even more so for the Bolts. AMC's in the dual lane. I mean, when we see him in mid, he's impacting fights left and right because he's always there. Now it's going to be a little while before BaRRa's truly rotating in.
We do have at least an answer to some of the anti-heal that's going to come, or that's going to be necessary to deal with what BaRRaCC and Inbowned have built into their kits. LASBRA blinks in to try and get something on Stuart, but it's an immediate ultimate. Popped by the Xbalanque. That'll get the Olympus Bolts to back off for a little bit of time. But Inbowned is going to go back in. The Stinger is now down from BaRRaCCuDDa. He'll be able to pick that one up as the Ruse Rebuke was just a defensive tool, and a Spirit Ball from BaRRaCC at range will make sure the Bolts cannot continue their chase. But going back to anti-heal, awesome Jake, and we've been seeing this a little bit more often. When these Curse Songs are picked up, supports are very so often rushing the upgrade of them, usually right after they finish their first item.
And it is just because of the value you're going to get out of it. Specifically, like Curse Song upgrades, actually pretty much all Relic upgrades when you're in support. They just feel nice and honestly give you maybe more worthwhile potency than what you're going to end up fighting with. But this one specifically, the Blighted Ankh, redistributing some of that healing to your team is going to be very helpful. Again, when you're up against a Yemoja, you're up against, you know, like the Circle of Protections, the healing that BaRRaCC is going to be using. Like, I don't see this Ankh immediately. Like that, to me, it could have been a level 12 Ankh, and I would have been fine with it, things like that. But I do see it as helpful and just even more sources of healing. That's going to be on top of the Hell, on top of the Scarab's Blessing in terms of what it's going to bring. Lifesteal if BaRRaCC gets it, things like that. I mean, LASBRA has some built into the kit as well, so a lot of potential for them. Brawlers, Divine, already getting picked up here by the Scarabs. Wouldn't be surprised if Inbound gets something like a Pestilence or a Contagion, things like that. And then that second Relic potentially becoming an Ankh. Because once those fights start off, and usually it's around that mid-game level 12 mark, that is where you really need that. And where I think we're going to start seeing Jake pop it a lot more, and Inbound, depending on it, you know, the level when it starts. Maybe wishing he had his a little sooner.
Well, for now, with this 3-0 kill lead, it's about 1,700 gold up for the Solar Scarabs. They've been attempting to start fights. We saw one at the purple buff earlier on where Stuart was invading the buff, had to walk away. Inbound comes back up, tried to reinitiate the fight with his ultimate, but only ended up trapping LASBRA inside. And Ravana's a pretty sneaky god to kind of move himself out and maneuver around. Even a River's Rebuke has that ultimate to get out. And then the rest of it just for disengage more than anything else. So the Solar Scarabs with their small lead and a little bit of their vision control have started the Pyromancer. Ven and Jake are on the way, but by the time they get there, the Pyromancer is already gone.
I mean, this is clean from the Scarabs so far, right? Good kills, good engages, I mean, good control on the lanes, and then into neutral objectives, being able to get the Pyromancer. Right now, it's the easiest one to scoop up right after the 10-minute mark. It's a lot easier to kill, not super tanky, doesn't do a ton of damage. And so it's a low risk, but decent reward if you're able to run in and pick that up. So now getting themselves even further ahead of the Bolts. I mean, farm-wise, the Scarabs are just playing out of their mind. This is very clean Smite.
This is a little more accustomed to what we're used to seeing now out of the Scarabs has been this early game. They've always been kind of an early scrap team, but we haven't really seen the early farm-centric style of Scarabs up until just recently, and now it really does feel like they are starting to hone that craft just a little bit more. We're seeing it even against some of the other top teams like the Leviathans and the Kings, where they're able to get some of these early leads. Now it's just a matter of what do the Solar Scarabs do with this lead. They already took a Pyromancer. Gold Fury always on the docket, especially when you have an Eset. But we've been seeing this a lot more out of pro teams now with this Trebuchet. 3-stack in mid, making a full 5-stack from the Bolts, pushing up the tier 1 tower. Gonna get a lot of pressure there. It's gonna put BaRRaCC in a bit of a pickle. And now awesome Jake and Haddix stuck inside the Rivers, or it's just gonna be Jake who used the Scarab's Blessing on himself. ScaraDD blocks the path, and BaRRaCC puts him down. ScaraDD at half HP will walk away. And that Stinger doing a decent bit of damage to ScaraDD, but BaRRaCCuDDa won't be able to pick that one up.
Yeah, longer cooldown for him. He's going to have to wait, just like Jake's going to have to wait. Scarab's Blessing only does so much to prolong his life. LASBRA, he's looking for more.
Ult's on top, but Scream has the Aegis and now has the Piercing Moonlight to get to the back line. LASBRA's gone. BaRRA has to walk away, but he doesn't have the distance to go. He doesn't have the range to get away from Stuart and Scream. 6 kills now for the Solar Scarabs, and well, that Gold Fury a moment ago that we were just discussing is now the eye of interest for the Solar Scarabs, and with no one from the Bolts around, they'll be able to grab these kills, grab a Fury, and we're going to be looking at a 4,000 plus gold lead once this objective goes down. This is going beyond just clean play from the Scarabs. They are just outperforming the Bolts right now.
Yeah, the Scarabs, the way they're playing right now, this is just good Smite. They haven't made like virtually any mistakes. Things that could go wrong just aren't for them. And so the Bolts are looking for their openings, looking for where they can go. Jake, you know, there in mid gets caught a little bit out of position. And this is actually where things get interesting because, you know, Mifflin was talking about it on the desk. And I think this is worth the talking point, which is that Inbound on Yemoja has been a massive improvement in terms of level of play.
Oh, yeah.
The point where a lot of the losses more recently, where this pick has been on the side of the Scarabs, was not due to Inbound's level of play. That being said, it does still have like a 21% win rate when the Scarabs are playing it. So it's something that while I think it has gotten better, it hasn't necessarily been able to elevate the team. But when you compare that to the win rate that it's had in the league here in Phase 2, it was like in the 80s, things like that, you've got a pick that is being played well by a lot of supports, really good kit. The walls there in mid earlier that we saw from Inbound were just on point. That, plus the healing, the presence of the stun, a lot of the control that this Yemoja is bringing. Despite nerfs getting thrown her way, it feels like at least once a month at this
Might
rate,
as well.
right? It has been very consistent where, you know, something's getting toned down. I think has been a top performer. And Inbound is giving a really good showcase of that. Small things like what we just saw in mid, a Riptide to delay the minions, whether that's going to help BaRRaCCuDDa get the farm or if it's just going to help make sure that that tower takes a little less damage, a little less quickly. It opens up this conversation. Now I think that you're in a spot where you're seeing this person and this god who is creating so many opportunities for the team.
Scream, beads gone. LASBRA and BaRRaCCuDDa back to the tier 1 tower. Stuart to try and clear away this purple buff, steal that from under the noses of the Olympus Bolts. The Bolts were aware that it happened, but not much that they could do about it. Haddix expended his teleport to get over to the left side of the map, expecting maybe a fight to break out, but nothing more to be had over there. And I think talking on the Inbound discussion, it's a phrase that we've heard before, you know, get your reps in, something like that, but at the start of the year, you know, that was definitely seen as Inbound's weakest god. You know, you almost give him the Yemoja just so that way you could kind of get the win. That's how some of the teams may have gone about that. But now that he's gotten those reps and he's gotten those heavier losses under his belt, and now he's been finding success on this god. At one point, if I'm not mistaken, during Worlds, it was actually banned away from him for the performance he was having.
You want another fun one, J-Mac? Because it's not just the... So the Yemoja is stats for the Scarabs, at least, are warring with another stat that exists for the Bolts. BaRRaCCuDDa, their team, it's really funny. They've been like... Or specifically, BaRRaCCuDda's been messaging me, but the entire team has been very curious.
Scarabs get the pyro.
Yeah.
Venenu inside the river will use the beads and the Aegis to walk out. Haddix picks up 2 with the ult to throw them away from everyone else. Scary deep by the stun on Venenu. No relics available to the hell, but a Scarab's Blessing from Jake.
Well timed.
We'll make sure that Venenu can get himself out. Clean play by the Bolts to find their escape.
Good, though. They get the relics, they get that ult, and they burned that teleport earlier you had highlighted from Haddix. So that's a huge win for the Scarabs, plus Pyromancer, now tier 1. Trebuchet still healthy enough. They can put some pressure on this tier 2 for free.
Full 10 stack in the mid lane without Fire Giant buff. This is a new era of Smite.
We're playing Assault, baby.
We are in a whole new era and a whole new game of Smite. But this tier 2 tower will not have much longer to go if this Trebuchet does not get stopped. The Bolts are not willing to step forward. LASBRA has even foregone the fight in the mid and has rotated in to get some farm in the jungle. The Solar Scarabs will just cleanly take this tier 2 tower away from the Bolts, and they can march their way over to the left side of the map as a minion wave is pushed up at the tier 1 as well.
And I love this. You got so much value out of that Trebuchet. You got the tier 1 and the tier 2, a lot of gold infusion.
8,000 up.
I mean, you are just rolling over the Bolts right now. And with this lead, things feel really solid. And that brings me back to what I was going to say, because again, the Bolts have asked about like, oh, well, like what are like our best performing gods, you know, like Jake has a 90% win rate or something ridiculous on Nox, things like that. And just all across the board, like, oh, who do we do best with? But also, and this one was fun, earlier this week, BaRRa said, what's our win rate against Eset? And I didn't look it up, you know, for like the entirety of it. I just pulled up whatever it was this year. And I think they had, going into this, 4 games played, 3 of which the Dragons had played the Eset. So you can imagine where this is going already. They have not won a game against an Eset this year.
Well, that doesn't bode well.
That does not bode well.
They're considering they're 8,000 gold down against an Eset right now. The Olympus Bolts are definitely going to want to strap up their boots if they want to try and find a win against the Solar Scarabs. A grouping around the Primal Fury. Inbound, down about a third of his HP. Can sustain up, but holding on to his Omi for now. And now we finally have the rest of the Solar Scarabs grouping around. Scary D and Scream. Haddix goes into the back line. Only picks up Inbound. But Inbound is fine with that. It will get plucked back. Takes a little bit of help, but Haddix creating plenty of zone and circle protection will get a big heal back. Piercing Moonlight into the back line will throw Scream right up against BaRRaCCuDDa, who does not have a Scarabs blessing. It got used on Jing, who has isolated himself. Scary D will keep him zoned away. Scary D might even just be able to get a kill with Venenu there. A little too much sustain. The Solar Scarabs, they all stay alive. Scary D zones literally the rest of the Bolts out. And the Scarabs get a Primal Fury to boot.
And they get another kill onto BaRRa, both relics, the shell from Jake, the ult from Jake, the ult from BaRRa, like so much used there by the Bolts. And yet they still are the ones limping back to base afterward. Again, the Scarabs playing it very cleanly. Inbound gets pulled in early on, but a good circle protection placement from BaRRaCCuDDa gets the healing out there. Inbound is then able to stay proactive and it good stuns. Scream with a nice deep dive. And even though I don't know that they needed to proc Jake's Scarabs Blessing and res him, that's like the worst value you're going to get out. Like, what's Jake going to do from that position? Him getting rezzed means nothing. BaRRa getting rezzed admittedly still probably means BaRRa just dies shortly thereafter. But that was well played by the Scarabs, giving themselves such clean objectives, man. If we got this Scarabs every single game, they're top of the standings. Yeah, no problem.
This is a whole shakeup of standings if this is the kind of Scarabs that we can get for even just the second half of this phase. If this is the level of play the Scarabs are going to come out with, that, what was it, 2-5 record that they had coming into the second half could very well change to a 7-7 record. I mean, change that 2-5 to a 5-2 for themselves. Maybe even further beyond that. A clean play out of the Scarabs in game number 1. They take tier 1 tower and right, tier 2 and right, and now can aim for the bird. The all 10 players grouped up here, not going to try and do any kind of split shenanigans from each other. Scary D goes in, goes back out, spear ball off the mark by BaRRaCCuDDa, but the Phoenix is the one taking the brunt of the damage. Scream able to poke it just slightly from out of range with his ranged autos that come from a couple of those abilities. Scarabs are just waiting patiently for their moment to strike.
And I like this. Look, you've got the Fire Giant, but you don't have the backdoor protection strip. Look how low that is. Now Stuart's going to have extra range.
Haddix goes in, picks up Inbound, throws him into the Phoenix. Inbound taking a whole lot of damage. He will go down. Circle protection not enough to kill Jake, but a Scarab's blessing and a Phoenix goes down. Awesome Jake should fall right after, but Scary D gets rooted out, tries to find the last hit onto Jake. And none of the bolts go down, but they lose that right Phoenix. And the Scarabs, patiently and disciplined, will now remove themselves from the base and head on out.
Now, I love this play from the Scarabs. I mean, admittedly, maybe not exactly the way you would have wanted it to go. You don't goose egg the bolts. They get that kill on to Inbound. But you get the Phoenix. You do get a little bit of pressure on him again. A couple of relics burned, specifically Aegis from Vin, is going to be something I think you can be proud of. You have to fall back. And so 2 minutes of this power play is going to be a little slower. And admittedly, getting a kill onto Inbound this late, after having no kills anywhere, is still going to be worthwhile for you, even if a support isn't necessarily the most worthy kill or worthwhile kill. It's still going to be a nice pickup for the Bolts. For the Scarabs on the other side, though, that Phoenix opens up a lot of conversations. Tier 2 still up on left, so I wouldn't mind seeing them maybe get aggressive over there. I don't think the Bolts can mount a Tier 2 defense and feel very confident about it. I think they could start around the line, but probably quickly retreat to the Phoenix.
I do see some of the offerings being picked up by the Scarabs as they make their way through the jungle into the last remaining Tier 2 tower. Minute and a half, just under, remaining on the Fire Giant buff for the Scarabs, and with already taking one Phoenix, that's usually more than you can ask for, at least on a first Fire Giant this early in the game. If they can take out the last of the towers, they'll still make it at least interesting for the Bolts to have to defend. Right side, probably the easiest lane to defend when going for a second Fire Giant, but with the way that the Scarabs are grouping up, could be one final bout on the left side to try and either take a Phoenix or even just take the game. If enough Scarabs can stay alive during it, and you can see Scream once again using those ranged autos to attack the Phoenix just outside of range.
This is where the engage is going to be a little more difficult, right? Where, you know, you do still have a Xing on the other side. Good pulls from Haddix could really set the Scarabs up, but look at the damage that they're doing.
Stuart is,
and the way they're trading this off.
Stuart is destroying this Phoenix, and no more fight from the Olympus Bolts. They recognize that they can't get rid of the range that's going to come from Stuart with that Darkest of Night pop through. Using it not as an offensive tool for a fight or a defensive tool in a fight, using it just to poke out the Phoenix. And with another wave of minions coming through, Stuart unchecked will do some good damage. Haddix picks up Inbound, who got thrown through his rivers. Inbound might be the one to go down yet again in this fight. But LASBRA got revived through Scream, finds a lot of damage in the backline with that piercing moonlight, but not enough damage to follow up the kill, not enough damage to take down the bird, and Scream just barely makes it through that Aegis to get away from the honey and the bee damage that came out. The Olympus Bolts hold their mid bird, but they are still 2 down.
I have to say, good work from the Bolts to be able to get a kill there, survive more specifically. LASBRA almost just burned by the Scarabs, but a good ult from Jake keeps him going. And the follow-up damage there from the Scarabs wasn't enough to save Inbound, as he highlighted, wasn't enough to get the Phoenix. So the Bolts get to put themselves in a favorable position for the first time. Granted, gold still nowhere near in their favor. Experience, yeah, forget about it. It's not in their favor either. They have a lot of climbing to do, but they are in a position where at least this next Fire Giant might not be a given over towards the Scarabs. Granted, it is also pre-EFG, and you've got fire minions to deal with, so I wouldn't be surprised if they just let this one go, because you don't have to worry about it. You can still set up a defense. You're doing good amounts of pressure in terms of minion waves. I think one more, this should be the last fire wave that's spawning just now. And so that's going to be the last that they truly have to deal with, pressuring the right-hand side. With mid not having fallen, that gives the Bolts a nice advantage to try and fight in here. Probably not looking for anything crazy around the FG, just looking for the defense.
And we do see Fire Giant will go to the Solar Scarabs. No contest from the Bolts, and from the gold deficit they're at, there's not much they can do to fight inside of the jungle. The primary initiation of the Bolts has been to get Haddix to the backline, to find Inbound with that ultimate and get the kill on Inbound. That's worked 2 out of 2 times that they've tried it so far on these Phoenix Sieges, but it's always been that follow-up after we've seen the Scarabs Blessing used every single time by Jake to keep one player alive, and it has kept the Bolts at a 5-man strong when it comes to the 4, but this ranged poke coming from Scream and Stuart has just been a little bit too much for them to handle at the Phoenix.
Yeah, and honestly, I think that like Scream has been doing a good job. Stuart has been very silently great this game. I mean, a lot of damage coming out, 12K from the Xbalanque, and it's been working well.
Haddix picks up 2 this time. It's ScaraDD and Inbound, but ScaraDD is the one setting it up the tower. Haddix goes down to BaRRaCCuDDa. Inbound finally just to find a way out of the shell. Just barely keeps him alive. Stuart takes out the Phoenix. The Spirit Ball slams 2. And the Olympus Bolts once again without 2 Phoenixes. And with the minions pushed up so far in mid, the Scarabs can do it all over again. Scream, Scary, and BaRRaCCuDDa still have ultimates available. They won't even need them to siege this last bird. Maybe they can hold on to BaRRaCCuDDa's ultimate for a Titan attack, but with 4 of the Bolts standing by, the Scarabs are going to play this out patiently.
Yeah, this one's all about sustain. How well can you hold it? You've got 20 seconds with a numbers advantage. Play in the smart way.
Doing a lot of damage over to it. Circle protection drops, and that's just GG. The Scarabs wait for the one moment that they need for the Bolts to step out of line or for the Titan to move just slightly forward. And the Solar Scarabs with an 8-2 kill count to end the game out find a big win in game number 1 against the Bolts.
And let me tell you, I thought it'd be louder in that booth. I thought they'd be a little happier.
I thought so too. I was
I'm real
waiting
with you. That was just good smite. Look, the best way and maybe the easiest way to break that down is that the Scarabs just played better. I mean, like, the draft was really good, I think, on both sides and had potential, but the Scarabs were able to control that early game a little bit better. The healing that we thought was maybe going to become a problem never ended up being an issue for them to deal with. They were very good, consistent. Like, the most, like, prolonging thing of that game was the Bolts getting those kills around the Phoenix line, specifically only on the inbound, but it was enough, taking away some of the healing, taking away some of that pressure, and slowing the Scarabs down from being able to push in. So they kept themselves alive, unfortunately not enough to be able to engage in that second FG, and then they just couldn't handle it. I think, you know, whether the Scarabs blessing, I didn't see where it went during that last right side Phoenix, but Haddix getting melted really gave the Scarabs the advantage they needed, especially since inbound lived, so they could just leverage that to a different lane.
All Scarabs needed was just to live with everybody through one fight, and they were able to push themselves to the end. Can the Solar Scarabs keep up that same pace in game number 2? That's the ultimate question. We'll hopefully get the answer to that right after this break.
the Solar Scarabs with a convincing performance in game number 1 that gives them the 1-0 lead in the set over the Olympus Bolts. Hand-delivered. It felt like this win was to the Solar Scarabs, just like you can get almost anything hand-delivered to your doorstep with Prime, as well as free games hand-delivered to your computer each month. We've got a great slate of games here in July, including North Atlantic Fishermen, if you've ever wondered what it's like to be on a crab boat. Well, now you can load into it on your computer, as well as in-game content, as well as free subs here on Twitch, so much more. And thanks again to Prime for being with us here in Season 9 of the SMITE Pro League. My name is Dolson, and I am hand-delivering analysis over to my friend Mifflin. Take it. Please, run away with it. What did the Scarabs get done here in game number 1?
That's just the classic Scarabs win condition. It came earlier than we're used to. Usually it's in game 2 where the Solar Scarabs are able to, bounce back and then push us on to a game 3, though it is standard. Early game pressure, that early rotation from ScaraD explicitly, I think, gets the ball rolling for that first blood onto Ven. From there, the Solar Scarabs just keep up their onslaught all the way across the map. Some key components, I think, were the rotations from Scream over towards BaRRaCCuDDa. I had said on the desk that, sure, AMC a good target, but if you come up dry, if you don't really land your kill, Tsukuyomi will likely fall behind. Not the case this time. Felt like anything Scream touched just worked out for his team. Yep. And that was true for the entirety of the team. Even good initiations, like the one we saw on the beginning of this clip. It was a blink in from Haddix, connects on the Yemoja, doesn't work out. Yeah, it's a light explosion. I mean, it's hard to break down one-sided matches like this. I think the only things that I would have changed had I been on the Olympus Bolts, I'm probably not going to hell, but if I am going to hell, I'm probably getting some CDR. You know what I mean?
The way you worded that, I had no idea where you were going with it.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, I thought you were like, I mean,
not the highway, the god.
Right, I've led a bad life, something like that. At least, like, if I am going to, at least I've had some fun, like, kind of deal. No.
Blaze of glory.
Yeah, blaze of glory. Here's a fun fact, and I'll give all credit to Goremizer.
Please.
Olympus Bolts against Eset have not won a single game against the Eset through this year. So, like, I think they've played against it 3 or 4 times, and they're winless up against the Eset. Just have not figured it out. And I think that's something they asked Gore like a couple weeks ago, and it like hasn't changed. So clearly, there's something with the Bolts up against this Eset that they just have not figured out. Now the question is, Miff, what are we doing here in game number 3? Right? Like, let's go ahead and skip over.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. I got it.
Let's skip right over. No, look, this is the moment for the Scarabs, right? This is it. Even if you win the set, win it in 2. This is the big growth moment, right? This is the big growth moment. And picks and bans for game number 2 will hopefully help the Solar Scarabs get there. You can't just skip over game 2, but
Solar Scarabs fans might want you to.
Right, give me a clean 2-0, right? That is the next stepping stone for this squad.
Up against the Bolts, though? Hard ask.
Hard ask. Look, winning game 3 against the Leviathans, fantastic. Winning game 3s consistently, that's maybe the expectation for the Scarabs.
Win. I'll take any set win for the Solar Scarabs.
But the next step is 2-0 wins in their sets. So, I mean, you could advance yourself a bit ahead of schedule if you're able to sneak one away from the Bolts.
Well, Bolts figured it out.
Yeah. You haven't beaten it. Ban it away. Tends to be the answer. Yemoja again for Inbound. Gone are the days of laughing at Inbound for locking in this pick. It has looked good here recently and looked good in game number 1. And the Scarabs would love to run it back here in game 2. An 88% win rate, Miff. Starts getting closer to that 90%. Yemoja, absurdly high win rate. And it's not through like 2 or 3 games. Through like nearly 20 games, Yemoja has won just about 90% of them. So the Bolts now a chance to answer back. Xing Chen, 85% win rate across 13 games. So absolutely some value in this pick.
So you're telling me Yemoja's got a 90% win rate with a 100% pick ban. She might just be good, but only competitively. Right, I don't want to see it in my ranked games, because Joe Schmo from the block in Diamond can't play Yemoja, all right?
Is Diamond good, Miff?
No, not at all.
Never mind. I'm cutting myself off. Xbalanque for the Solar Scarabs is the lock-in. Remember, it was X-Ball plus Eset last time. Gonna have to be something other than the Eset in mid for BaRRaCCuDDa this game. But BaRRaCCuDDa is so good at these traditional mages as well. Also good at this style of build. Kukulkan has like such an evil villain laugh when you lock him in.
He's like the
Red Baron dog.
yeah,
is
the
what
Red Baron dog. Yeah.
We had this conversation before,
I don't think it was about this, but we have
had-
talked about the Red Baron dog.
but about something else.
I think it was your laugh. I think you went full Red Baron once or twice.
I probably have. If it's you and I, odds are I'm off track laughing about something at some point throughout the set. Kukulkan though, Myth, I thought punishable last time we saw the pick for the Solar Scarabs, but it was anything but. In Game 3 against the Leviathans, BaRRaCCuDDa goes 8-0. The big goose egg on the death column in 13. The Leviathans in that individual game just had no answers.
And Kukulkan into Daji and Jing both have got some good, some bad matchup, right? No CC immunity inherent to the kit, so Whirlwind of Rage and Steel and Palau both going to be pretty hard to deal with for Kukulkan. The only way he deals with it is by positioning. Pretty easy to do. Walk up to your wave, drop tornado, walk back to your tower, rinse, repeat until level 20. But outside of the ultimates from both of those two gods, it is telegraphed aggression. Jing double jump forward into the knockup, tornado your feet, all of a sudden he's at least taking damage for doing it to you. Daji tricks your spirit, you start glowing as Kukulkan, you know she's on the way, tornado on your feet, at least you're dealing some damage in exchange. So I'm imagining pretty decent trade potential for this Kukulkan. But I am glad that you bring up BaRRaCCuDda's previous match on it, because it's the exact same style of build that we saw from Ben in the previous game. It was double stacking start, Obsidian Shard, third slot, into the Bumba's Hammer. That is incredibly low CDR. I think you can get away with it a little bit more so on Kukulkan. You kind of want that healing on cooldown from Hell. But if you're not able to establish as early a lead as the Solar Scarabs did in the previous Kukulkan match for BaRRaCCuDda, you might not just have the opportunity to get to that portion of your build. Until Bumba's Hammer, you have 0% CDR. Makes it very, very difficult to play this god, and makes every single one of the abilities you cast out even higher value.
Yeah, I love this Daji pick for LASBRA, not only because of Kukulkan and the ability to force a lead for the Bolts, but just the play style that it allows for LASBRA in general. I mean, I was hoping to see some of it with the Ravana, didn't quite get it. Haven't seen Daji in a handful of games for LASBRA. Tends to be banned out against this Bolt squad because LASBRA most of the time is just that good, that talented on the pick. So the Olympus Bolts myth still needing both of their carries outside of a world of pure chaos. Olorun gets banned away. Freya still available. Could opt for magical ADC, something a bit more standard in mid. It'll end up being the Jing way for BaRRaCCuDDa. So the least absurd of all the options ends up being the pick for Bear.
Yeah, we might as well call Jingwei all reliable.
34 games played this phase.
That's right.
That's
and
nuts.
probably like 17 of them are BaRRaCCuDDa, if I had to guess.
Let's see if I can figure out Gore's spreadsheet.
Yeah,
here
and I'll
while
talk
you're
to the fans
talking.
at home
Yeah.
while you try and navigate that for yourself. I think someone might come over and try and help you out. Now, the more that I look at the Olympus Bolts draft, the less I like this Kukulkan lock-in. Daji, Jing, we already talked about how their ultimates can really make it difficult to navigate some of these team fights just by nature of having so much CC. Now with Odin as well, Ring of Spears, no answer for Xbalanque or Kukulkan in that regard. So Phantom Shell has become a topic of conversation very early on. You have to go beads. Your beads are going to be under pressure pretty consistently. The mid 3v3 having 2 AoE CC targets. Very nice. And the Olympus Bolts have built themselves a composition already where you can kind of fully put your attention towards that mid 3v3.
Yep.
Leave Jingwei alone on an island. Who cares? Like, just airstrike out.
Well, Myth, Gore came over here and, like, wiggled his fingers towards the computer.
He's still wiggling, like, is the thing.
Right, but it's his whole body this time. His money don't jiggle.
It folds. I like to see you wiggle.
For sure. Right. He came over here and worked his magic on this great Alienware PC. Jingwei,
Man, we're so cringe.
the most played god in the league this phase at 34 games, now 35.
Take pleasure.
Oh
in the
God, I
crushing
wish I
of
could do like
one's
the background
enemies.
music. My money don't jiggle. It folds. I like to see you wiggle. Yeah, right.
Thank God their mics aren't live.
Yeah, he doesn't have any money, is what Gore said. I said it anyway.
Come on, man.
Well, in his pocket, right? Jingwei, 34 games played across the phase so far. Myth, take a guess before we break down this Osiris. Take a guess, the second most played god this phase.
Overall?
Overall.
Second most played overall.
Jingwei at 34.
Jingwei at 34. Man, it can't be Yemoja.
Oh, no, this is Season 9. This is Season 9
Oh,
in
for
general.
Season 9 as a whole. Can't be Yemoja. She's getting banned too much. Osiris?
Yep, Osiris, spot on at
Yeah.
32 games. Bastet, the pick for the Solar Scarabs here in game number 2, giving Scream one of his most storied picks in an attempt to take the 2-0 win.
Back
And
to
Myth,
hell.
we're going back to hell. All right, well, we're going straight to hell here in game number 2.
And
says
hopefully some
Venenu.
CD this time.
And a build change maybe changes your tone about this hell pick.
Look, Book of Thoth in first slot, I'm okay with. I'd prefer it to be Warlock staff, especially with as aggressive a composition as the Solar Scarabs had in game 1. Similar levels of aggression this time. Yemoja's going to, spawn some water walls around you, and Bastet's going to be there to apply the damage. So if you're going to go double stack, maybe Warlock staff first. But either way, I think just a bit criminal to not have enough CDR. Like, if Bumba's Hammer is going to be your only CDR, you're talking like 20 minutes in the game until you're getting like the right amount of healing for your team. Get a Breastplate of Valor in there. Put a Chronos Pendant.
Sure.
Anything. Literally anything. I'm begging.
He is begging. For one Breastplate of Valor, you can feed Mifflin's hunger for some CDR for just one day.
I eat way more than that.
For one game. I said your hunger for CDR, though.
Oh, I see. Yeah, satiated.
Right, satiated for now.
I'll take the gold instead.
Fair enough.
2,300.
Well, your money would jiggle in that case.
It certainly would.
Bastet versus Daji Myth. Who do you like here in this jungle matchup?
1v1s, probably not going to happen too often, and if they do, Daji. Team fight presence, Daji. Bastet's like not picked by anyone else for a reason. It does have the potential to like get an early ball rolling, but if we're just like blanket statement in a void, blank space,
Yeah.
Daji every portion of the game.
In a way, Myth, if you zoom far enough out, that's just where we are. Think about us. We're on this small little blue pebble
Uh-huh.
floating through an endless void.
Uh-huh.
And we have somehow found our way in all of that cosmic background to talking about SMITE on camera for a living.
My ancestors hunted mammoths so that I could complain about wage and talk about SMITE. That's awesome. They went out there with spears and killed massive animals, and now I'm talking about whether or not Ven's going to build CDR. That's crazy.
We are existential on the desk. And the only reason we're existential now, Myth, is because history has taught us,
It's a flat circle.
history has taught us that mammoths
there
are
with a
good for
spear.
warmth and meat and those sorts of things. But also, we're headed to a game 3, right? It just feels inevitable unless the Solar Scarabs can change the course of history for themselves here in the past. Look, the Kukulkan pick, I'm excited to see. Myth, you and I have some thinking to do, and J-Mac and Gormizer, they have some casting to do here in game 2 between the Bolts and the Scarabs.
And we'll sure try and do that casting for this second matchup now in game number 2 between the Solar Scarabs and the Olympus Bolts. We'll see if the Scarabs can find that 2-0 win that they have so desperately been searching for against so many of these top teams. They've gotten so close, so many times, Gore, but it always ends up going to a third game, and whether that third game actually pans out is always a little bit up in the air. But now the Solar Scarabs, with this style of draft, putting BaRRaCCuDDa on something that he was able to pop off with previously, alongside the help of Scary D in that instance of that game. I think the two of them had like 15 or 16 kills between each other to find a big win. And now it's going to come down to this second game. The Olympus Bolts, though, haven't changed too much of their draft and playstyle, still keeping it fairly team fight oriented with a lot of sustain from Ven.
Yeah, honestly, I think that this is going to be interesting to see if the small, little adjustments they've made are going to help out. No Khepri this time. Odin joins the fray, right? Having a little bit more anti-heal readily available, but maybe more healing at least available. Well, Inbound plus now the Ravana able to heal himself. There's some of that over there. You get Scream on Bastet, which is just frightening. I mean, just outright frightening. And honestly, I think in, maybe not in the exact same conversation, because that one is years built on itself. But BaRRaCCuDDa looked absolutely insane on this Kukulkan the last time we got to see it. So I am expecting a lot out of mid lane. And with the way Stuart, I mean, look at him. He's just bullying BaRRaCCuDDa right now. This is a great way for this lane to go if you're a Scarabs fan.
Stuart and Inbound got a lot of pressure early on, which against the Xing Jing way. probably expect that when you're looking at Xbalanque and Yemoja. And BaRRaCCuDDa, if I'm not mistaken, the last time that he went with this build, or went with this god, he went into Book of Thoth, Warlock Staff, and I think he got Poly, Soul Reaver, and then a Bumba's Hammer in the mix out of that to kind of round things out. So we'll see if he goes to that same style of build. He got a lot of value from that kind of a build, and it panned out to be a massive win for the Solar Scarabs during that set. We'll see if they can reprise that here in game number 2. Now that Jake and Bear have hit level 2, it means that they have a little bit more fight back in lane, but only a little bit more fight back. And now we gotta kind of see the downsides of this Ravana solo. Not the greatest at clearing early on.
Yeah, it's one of those weird things where Ravana, as a god in the jungle, levels 1 through 3, like he can get active, he can get in there, he can fight. Solo lane, a little different story. Like, right, you're focused more on your sustain. Like you said, your clear might not be too great, and so it is something that is just more about staying alive. Odin does a decent amount of damage, has some good CC as well. Luckily, ScaraDD should be able to immune a lot of that if timed right, that overhead kick. And the healing is going to be enough. So, you know, it's not long after an Odin that he's going to be able to find that clear. But it is something that he has to work with. And now, potentially going for an invade with the amount of aggression they have here. They might either find first blood or a buff.
Jump in, gets the blink from LASBRA, and well, that's a massive W for the Solar Scarabs jungler. That means that LASBRA not going to have that easy initiation tool for one of these fights. Blue buff invaded because of the fact that LASBRA can't step into those two. And so, Haddix going to lose out on a little bit of that mana sustain, something that Odin specifically so desperately needs. Take quite a bit of his abilities and a little bit of his mana to clear those lanes out.
A majority of his clear is 2 abilities, right? Like, most of the time, like, if you're lucky, you can just pop the shield and walk into the middle of the minions, or just use your jump. But most of the time, you're still seeing people do the full-on bird bomb effect in terms of trying to find that clear. So yeah, he's gonna be eating up mana. I mean, look at his mana bar as of right now. That's something ScaraDD with really a little bit of, I was gonna say, with a little bit of healing over there, it's gonna feel great.
Inbound, you're a little too far up, my friend. Does find a stun on BaRRaCCuDDa, but first blood to the Olympus Bolts. And I mean, we've seen so many of these supports as of recent Gore just jumping up to the enemy purple buff, trying to slow down the push of the purple, kind of delay how long it takes them to get back into lane, but this time around, LASBRA a little too privy of it, managed to pick up first blood for his team.
I think the only issue I'm really finding with that, because like my immediate reaction, my knee-jerk reaction was to just hit the, like, what are you doing up there? Like, why, like, you're alone, no one's going to be there to help you. And admittedly, I think you as first blood are worth more than whatever that buff.
That burple?
That burple buff. Yeah, it's gonna be worthwhile. And so, you know, it is that little bit of a question, but admittedly, as they chase down Jake, actually with an ult, they're gonna pull him in.
Yeah, pulls him right into the sands, and Jake will find the knock-up, but will also be knocked down. Stuart will put himself up for the first kill for the Solar Scarabs, and well, that's just a great reinitiation. No level 5 for Jake, so no CC immunity. Picked up a shell for that first relic, so it doesn't have a beads to get away from Screammmmm. Good rotation by the jungler.
Yeah, good rotation. Again, the Scarabs maybe kind of slipping around. ScaraDD has to play a little carefully there. They have, I want to say, such a massed control for the Scarabs right now, though. I'm not really too upset by Inbound's death there. I think that, again, maybe a little further than you would like. That's always been one of the problems if you go back over the last, like, Scarabs losses most of the time, if it comes from anywhere from the support. If there's a game where Inbound's 0-5, you can trace at least 3 of those to just weird positioning sometimes. I don't think that's going to stick, though. I think that was one that, again, if you get that buff, you strip it away, you give more power over to your lane, you lose the buff. As a support, yes, it's not great that LASBRA gets first blood, but it's not the end of the world. Plus, you get a return kill over there onto Jake, so both supports have fallen down. I don't think I'm going to harp on them too hard for it, although it has given the Bolts maybe a little more leverage to work into this game and worm a closer lead, I want to say, in the first 3 minutes than maybe would have seen otherwise. Overall, though, not too terribly bad. Like I said, a lot of it is going to be patience. I mean, you've got 2 Transcendences and a Book of Thoth. The Scarabs are not necessarily, like, looking to be active right now. This is a farm game for them.
This is definitely get your farm up, get your stacks in there, get those items online. BaRRaCCuDDa doesn't really hit too hard on Kukulkan this early in the game. I mean, Ultimate's still going to hit hard because it's a magical ultimate from a mage at this point. And having Book of Thoth will give him a little bit of that extra power to go with his stuff. Inbound. pulled into the Palau. Riptide won't find his way out. Serpentine win a little bit off the mark, but Inbound still goes down. Damage event is good, but Jake may fall down as well. A jump in by Scream will make it a 1-for-1 trade. The supports both go down. ScaraDD wrapping around the top of the fight, but doesn't really have the damage of the lockdown to get a kill on either. Ven will just use his cleanse, and he'll be out and good to go.
He gets half health on Vin, though. Just kind of like showcase, like, hey, look what I can do. And when I need to,
Look at me.
I can absolutely cause that damage. I think between that and the Bastet, Vin is going to have to play very carefully. No Aegis online just yet for 4 more levels. He's going to have to worry about that. Don't know how many rotations we'll see from ScaraDD in that time, but it is something that's going to be on their mind. Downside, though, I mean, you go 1-for-1 against support for support. That's not the end of the world. Biggest thing that changes, blue buff not going to be able to get invaded this time around, so Haddix will get a buff, unless ScaraDD is just a master of timing. But yeah, not even going to be looking up there. They're going to be missing out on some of the experience that they otherwise could have stolen away from the Bolts and furthered them.
For now, BaRRaCCuDDa and Inbound will just go ahead and grab those mid-heartbeat camps themselves. Stuart has once again been left on his own island after getting that first kill in his lane over up against Jake, who's been able to poise himself a nice little XP lead, about half a level or so over BaRRaCCuDDa at this point, which means that he'll get to just free farm in this lane. He's got his Transcendence online, nearly halfway stacked. Pick up a short bow on his way back through. ScaraDD didn't like to go for the sustain option in this solo lane build, so then we always look at with the Ravana, you know, do they want to go for the soul leader before they start stacking up their defenses and their mitigations? Do they want to even go for the full mitigation style build with that sigil? ScaraDD's going to at least prioritize the Glad Shield over any kind of sustain.
Honestly, you know, again, being able to... I mean, look how much damage mitigated we've seen from a Ravana over the last couple of weeks, right? It is wild. And so I think that we're going to continue seeing builds similar to that one, right, where you're going to just build it up over time. You're going to be able to take what feels like maybe too much damage, deal just that same amount. Yeah, maybe half, depending on how much you mitigate, because it gets to be a massive number right back. Plus that and the ability to immune stuff is just wild.
Stuart, be careful. BaRRaCCuDDa uses his ultimate, gives away that he no longer wants to be on that fight, especially Jake and LASBRA walking around. I thought maybe BaRRaCCuDDa could bait that a little bit more, but Screaming Inbound on the run up towards the enemy obelisk will scare LASBRA away. Inbound's willing to pick a fight with Jake, and when he's got BaRRaCCuDDa on tail end ready to go, that will force Jake to walk back. Riptide does catch him out, but Jake has that second leap available, and he'll get himself out. But LASBRA on the tail end, this could be a pince maneuver by the Olympus Bolts.
They just want the kill onto Jake badly, but like you said, it could end up resulting
did
poorly
not.
for them. I mean, that's just a kill onto the support. I don't know if Vin or LASBRA want to loop around now.
Yeah, no, when your support loses a quarter of his HP to just the Kukulkan sneeze, I mean, yes, he had the tornado ticking on him, damage across the board, but BaRRaCCuDda's still holding on to ultimate. They go back in there. He's got that ready and unlock.
And I love that Inbound sticking around afterward. They get the kill, steal away from the obelisk, get to spawn themselves one trebuchet over there on right. That'll be hanging out for a
One
little bit.
singular trebuchet.
One trebuchet. And then, you know, again, is it going to... I honestly don't even see them using it for a little while. Maybe they poke it just to see how far up it can go. Maybe get some pressure for ScaraDD, but I think that's one that could kind of hang out there for a little bit until Pyromancer is up, maybe kind of giving split attention, or maybe after Pyromancer's down when you want to go for a Gold Fury.
Oh, well, Jake enough to scare BaRRaCCuDDa into having to use his ultimate for a red buff. Never a fun feeling to have as a mid laner, having to use a decent cooldown ultimate in order just to secure a buff. But at the end of the day, it seems that BaRRaCCuDDa doesn't really care to have to hold on to this ultimate. Has just been throwing it out there in the team fights when given the opportunity to do so. And I imagine with that, the Scarabs probably not going to try and pick too many fights, at least for another minute or so.
Yeah, I think this is going to be the pace roughly set for a little while anyway, because now Warlock Staff just finished by BaRRaCCuDDa. Stacks are going to be getting kind of more importance there. Vin following, you know, very similarly. Warlock Staff is on the route, but he has a little bit more cooldown, which I'm sure Mifflin is incredibly happy about.
To get the seal of approval with only 10% though.
I was going to say,
He
you know,
was
how much satiates his hunger? Does he need the full 40%?
I think this is just like the crumb of CDR right now. Hasn't gotten to the crust of the bread just yet. He's like, like when you pick the sandwich up, the crumbs that are left behind, that's what he's at right now.
We'll see whether or not he can get to the full-on, I guess, loaf, if he wants to. We'll see where it goes for him. I'm really interested in the power dynamic in mid, though, because I feel like we see a lot of damage that can come out of a Hell. And the potential, the top end, is incredible. But what we saw BaRRaCCuDDa do on this pick, specifically against Adaji, was just nuts to me. And I expect that we're going to see something that could be very fun from that perspective. Again, it's going to be a little bit, though. I'm not expecting BaRRaCCuDDa to just have a nuts performance right now at level 11. It's the time. But in, like the next 5 minutes, you're going to have this ult that is great for secure. It's really good, especially in jungle avenues. And so you're really going to be kind of leveling up into that performance that we got to see out of it last time. Is it going to be the exact same, what was it, like 6-0 and 8, something ridiculous like that? Maybe not, but I do still think it's going to be incredibly potent and something that the Bolts are going to have to deal with, and they're going to have to deal with it sooner rather than later.
I gotta tell you, Stuart has been on power farming mode.
I love
this
it.
entire game. I mean, I think every single one of those left heartbeat camps has been going his way. He's make constant pressure up to the purple buff.
He's rocking the Weltmeister 2014 skin. Like, I love it. I did of all the Xbalanque
I had
skins,
to think about what you were saying for a moment, and then I realized where you were going. Like, okay, yeah, that's definitely a good one. It threw me off for a moment, but I got what you were coming from there. Nobody uses those skins anymore.
That's what I was
really
thinking,
sad.
right? Like, when was the last time someone used that? I mean, outside of last game where he used it, I haven't seen anyone rock the soccer skins.
Inbound, he's got to juke out. The Lao will throw up his own ultimate, because he doesn't have his beads to get away from there. Does have a Riptide. Cage comes down. Inbound locked inside the cage, trying to Riptide out, but that's not going to do him anything. Servant of 9 wins will hit Haddix. Jake credit to the kill, but Scary D now into the back line of the fight. Venenu has lost out on his shell, but still has the healing available to him. LASBRA goes back in. Scary D, half HP in the middle of 5, even lower now. We'll have to go out. Finds a root onto 1. BaRRaCCuDDa. A couple of shots not going to be enough, and look at the damage that BaRRaCCuDDa can put out with just that first ability.
Yeah.
The Bolts find 1, and they disengage over to the Pyro.
Zephyr and an auto from Stuart took BaRRaCCuDDa from full to half instantly. That's going to be something they have to worry about. Pyro should be easy. I say should, but Scream's here.
BaRRaCCuDDa drops the Tornado. That will get the Bolts off the Pyro. Beads away from Scream.
Woo.
And the Olympus Bolts narrowly take that Pyromancer back just as the Tornado is fading away. But those were thin margins for the Olympus Bolts to grab that one. And look at the state of the game. 3-3 on the kills. Gold, 400 separating these two teams, with the Scarabs with that slight lead.
And the only massive difference is where those kills go. 1 kill is on Jake. He's 1-3 and 2. Inbound's 0-3 and 3. You've got Stuart, BaRRaCCuDDa, and Scream each with a kill themselves.
Supports time? Oh,
And
no,
yeah,
that's
just the
trashing.
supports so far. But the experience, and it was just showcased on that graph, is really what matters. You mentioned Stuart power farming, 2 levels. Let's call it 1.5 since BaRRaCCuDDa just ticked up to 14. But also in the jungle, Scream has been out farming LASBRA. And while I think teamfight-wise, Lao, very important, very powerful in comparison to a single target ult from a Bastet, that level difference is going to come in handy for Scream whenever they try to leverage it in some of these 3-on-3s. Any skirmishes around like a Gold Fury coming up soon should favor the Scarabs because of those numbers. Granted, they also should favor them, again, looking into jungle fights. BaRRaCCuDDa, Tornadoes, really, really well placed, can get a lot of damage. Serpent of the 9 wins, whether it's for secure, it is going to get you a ton, or if it is for just straight up trying to kill somebody, usually, again, compact jungle corridors, really good at limiting people and forcing them kind of to get hit by this, or Papanagus, of which there are none on the Bolts. They only have shells. And so that's going to be, again, maybe another small one, but could be a victory for the Scarabs just off of something like that.
Because a shell will mitigate some of the damage, a couple hundred of it, but when BaRRaCCuDda's ult is clipping carries for 12 to
It can do
1,400
so much damage.
plus, you're going to need more than shell. BaRRaCCuDDa used his ult. Well, there's almost 900 damage right there. Beads burned by BaRRaCCuDDa to get away from the Lao, but he walked back up to the cage, and BaRRaCCuDDa will go down. A good attempt by Inbound to save him with a Riptide, but Awesome Jake, another one to pick up the kill. Scarabs will lose their mid laner once again, and now the Bolts have pressure around the Fury.
Maybe not expecting the blink from Haddix, but I don't know why. Look, you use your ult, you just use both your relics. There's no reason to have a Kukulkan with that low health to walk that far forward. That is an immediate advantage for the Bolts.
No ult for inbound, so no easy way to seal this one out. Darks of Night's used, though, by Stuart. That backs the Bolts away from the Gold Fury. Jake will be poked out. ScaraDD stunned out. ScaraDD losing a lot of HP. Has the overhead kick and has the Mystic Rush to get himself on out, but he is at tiny slivers of health, and LASBRA will chop the last of it away. A kill up for the jungler of the Olympus Bolts, and maybe one more they can find. Inbound ultimate from Jake will pick him up and throw him into the waiting arms of BaRRaCCuDDa. The 3-3 slash stun that was just moments ago has now dwindled up to 3-6 for the Bolts. And all that gold now going their way as a tier 1 tower falls.
Yeah, being able to pick that up. This should be an opening for the Gold Fury as well. There's not really an opportunity. Ult's already down for the Scarabs. No one in a good position to come and fight this. I mean, one questionable step, or about 3 steps there for BaRRaCCuDDa. And just opens the door wide for the Bolts. And that last Gold Fury fight, I mean, a little shaky for him, right? I admire the Scarabs still wanting to be aggressive, but maybe too aggressive, knowing the numbers were against them, right? A 4v5, ScaraDD goes in deep, has to use all of that defense immediately, and still doesn't get out with their life or a kill on top of it. Scream, I think, and Stuart able to get some decent damage out there, but not quite. I think the performance and the strength they wanted out of that fighter were expecting out of it prior to that. So Scarabs have to kind of go back to the drawing book and well, really hold on to this one where they are now, because you know, last time around it was a steady flow of gold and experience in their favor. Experience still in their favor right now, barely, but still there. The gold, though, starting to shift over towards the Bolts, should give them a little more opportunity to start flexing that around the map. It's only, you know, 2 towers down the entire game. It's 1 on left and 1 in mid, 1 for each team. So this next Pyromancer in, you know, a little over a minute, minute and a half, that's going to be one where I think it's important to show face if you're the Scarabs. Not necessarily to die over, but just to make sure that you can get it, try to equalize that gold that is otherwise in the favor of the Bolts.
Yeah, I think 1,000 gold is really nothing at 18 minutes at this point. It's just that the Bolts have now shown that they've got some fight back against the Scarabs, and we've seen that back
Pretty
and
solid
forth
fight back
between this at the very least. Some anti-heal starting to be picked up, though. Scream did get that Brawler's Beat Stick. BaRRaCCuDDa picks up a full Divine Ruin after his previous death. So now some answers to what Venenu has in his wheelhouse of sustain, and because of that, Inbound hasn't decided to go into a Cursed Stalk of his own. Instead, he'll get a Phantom Shell to deal with what Haddix has. Pyromancer, at least being teased by the Olympus Bolts. It will spawn in a couple members of the Scarabs here to try and stop this one out, but I think between Haddix and Jake, not much they can do for the Solar Scarabs, at least, to get in and take that one away. So the Pyro will go to the Bolts and a little bit more gold in their pocket.
And they get a Trebuchet to boot, so they get a couple of small wins, but those amass over time. And that's really the big thing right now. Like you said, 1,000 gold, even 2,000 gold, 20 minutes in is not this crazy spiraling out of control, can't fight back scenario. But it is, you know, the beginning of something uncomfortable if you can't start pulling things back in your favor. And honestly, I think a lot of it has been around some of the mid lane picks, specifically like Hell being able to provide some healing. Haddix, I have to give some credit. It's not going to be easy to escape if you are BaRRaCCuDDa, Inbound, or Stuart. And ScaraDD without the ult, so there's a lot of opportunities for this Odin to potentially lock that cage down and put the Scarabs into a scenario they don't want to be in.
I'll say, I just watched Scream drop 2 or 3 abilities onto Haddix, even through his shield. Scream didn't do a whole lot of damage. He needs a little bit of that percent pen in there to deal with all the physical defense that Haddix has stacked up for himself. Breastplate of Valor, Sovereignty, and working towards what I imagine will be a Spectral, considering that Stuart has gone in towards this crit route. Atalanta's bow already picked up. Last game around, it was the Deathbringer in that 4th slot. Seems that he's going back that same route. But as we hit this kind of brief moment of the action, Gore, with the Gold Fury down, the Pyromancer down, Fire Giant likely out of the question, at least this early on, without a couple of picks out there. I mean, where do the Solar Scarabs kind of put their attention? Do they just go back, get that farm, get Stuart online, or do they maybe try and force something just to try and see if they can maybe grab a tower somewhere?
Well, I think you have to be present for Fire Giant fights, right? So you want to be a little more right skewed. I think that that's where the problem comes in. BaRRaCCuDDa and Stuart can go over to left, and BaRRaCCuDDa can back and fly in. Stuart can back and slowly walk his way over there. By the time BaRRA, like a fight could be going on, BaRRA could have gotten a kill, then Stuart joins in. So it's that weird, positioning conversation when you're up against someone like a Jing that comes into the equation. I also think that there's so many different problems, because like you said, like that Odin we saw a couple of times there did not take a lot of damage and is going to be a problem, but is he like the problem? I think that being able to burn down LASBRA early, ideally you could burn down BaRRA early, because I don't know that Vin is providing as much for this squad. The healing is nice, and so get rid of that, and maybe you get rid of the fountain that keeps the flow going for the bolts. But it is the damage right now, I think, from the Daji that is worrying me a little bit more. Very difficult to kill off. LASBRA has been very good at getting in and not getting taken down. 2-0-4 looks really solid. So we'll see whether or not they're even able to get to him, I think, first. A lot of it as well, I mean, 5 of the 6 deaths that the Scarabs have could be argued. I mean, Inbound, it's a little bit of half and half. I would argue 2 maybe didn't need to happen, and then a few that were kind of forced to happen. That death from BaRRaCCuDDa definitely could have been avoided. And so there's a few times so far for the Scarabs where they've given up unnecessary ground. And I'd like to see that, go back to what you were doing in Game 1, being a little more aware of it. Don't play like you're ahead right now, because you're not, right? You just have to kind of make that mental adjustment. But I still think they have a lot of the same capabilities. Damage output-wise, it's only going to get better for them. Deathbringer just now finished for Stuart, and he's been swinging incredibly hard from the back line. And so I'm still expecting good plays from the Scarabs, but this is going to be probably the most difficult engage of their game so far, is trying to figure out the best way in. I mean, Scream, Scary aren't the best initiators for the way this fight will go. It almost feels like they have to retaliate against the Bolts.
Now that the fire pool is spawned, Inbound pops his Phantom Shell, gets himself out. Immediate disengage by the Bolts. Scary teleports himself back in, and that's an ult for 2 longer cooldown relics on the Scarab. Scary D was trying to at least split push a little bit and try and stop this Trebuchet that's now marching up the left side of the map, or I guess rolling up the left side technically. The minions next to it are marching with it, but got forced over to the fight immediately because thought something was going to break out.
It's a good ult to pull away from the Bolts.
Wow.
But you don't have a second Phantom. BaRRaCCuDda's here. I don't know.
He can't get there.
I feel like you could try to defend this, but now no, the Scarabs are all scattered to the wind. This is just going to be a free FG.
Olympus Bolts will take the Fire Giant quietly. No answer from the Scarabs. Well, at least they'll try and get something of their own. Only Fury started up, and you can see how much damage those offhands do from the Fury. That magical damage coming through when it just holds up its claws at you just to fire that damage out. Only Fury up, so the Olympus Bolts will have to deal with a couple of those minion waves at the very least. The next ones that come through, Scream will go over and try and deal with the Trebuchet that's now batting away at the HP of the Tier 1 tower. Might get one more. No, he's standing in circle. He won't get that last shot in. So Tier 1 in mid or in left will stand, but the Tier 2 in mid goes down. The Olympus Bolts can now start to try and play with some of this lead that they've been able to build up and see how much further they can push it.
And I like, the state of the map right now, still favorable for the Scarabs. With the Fire Giant, it's about to change drastically, but this is going to limit the Phoenix potential that the Bolts have, because you had several towers standing up, 5 of them prior to the Tier 2 in mid going down, 4 until the Tier 1 on right gets taken. And so a lot of gold that's going to start going the way of the Bolts here. And it's going to shift pretty drastically map state-wise in the opening that having a Phoenix exposed is going to allow them. But they don't really have the same potential to push it down this early on. Again, that first Fire Giant, it's a little shaky, even on a good win, to be able to knock down a Phoenix and get a big fight under a Phoenix during that first engagement. And I think when you've got a Kukulkan on one side, you've got the Xbalanque hitting as hard as they do, trying to dive a Phoenix, and maybe sometimes going unnecessarily deep, especially when there are minions that aren't minions there if you're the Bolt, then it's going to be something that I think could be maybe biting off more than they can chew. Instead, yeah, do what you're doing. Knock down the towers, no Fury to pick up. Pyromancers respawn if they really want it. And that could be something that they just fall back and scoop up to get some extra gold on their way back. But the Tier 2, Tier 1, there's 2k gold on the map on the left-hand side. That'll give them another hefty infusion. And for some of these, it's going to be upgraded relics. For some, it might be upgraded starters. And specifically that one, I'm looking at Haddix right now. But then you're also going to see finished Tier 3s, maybe some Tier 1s, Tier 2s picked up. by the Bolts when they are able to scoop that back in their favor. So it's going to be, again, maybe not the biggest shift in dynamic, but still something to hang their hat on.
It does make it a little bit difficult for the Scarabs now, with the last towers taken away, 5 still standing up for the Olympus Bolts. One team fight will not necessarily win the game for the Scarabs, and even if they're able to keep a few players alive, there'll still be a lot of structure standing up, so can't even say an immediate turnaround win. So the Olympus Bolts have at least kind of poised themselves up to having a fallback should something go wrong. LASBRA to the mid, forward to the left. Haddix gets 2 inside the cage, and Inbound going to hold on to his Phantom Shell. Darkstone Knights goes through. Damage onto the Phoenix is good. Jake not going to pick up anybody except for Inbound with the ultimate, but Jake is going to be pulled right back into the damage to the mid and the jungle. Finds the leap out of the throne room, but Stuart picks up one of those picks, but the damage is already done. The Solar Scarabs lose their left bird.
They managed to burn out a majority of the Fire Giant power play. Look, 40 seconds left. Sincerely doubt that we're going to see any more from the Bolts. But the Bolts got 5 towers plus the Phoenix on top of that. And they get the most worthwhile Phoenix, so it's going to be an incredibly valuable Fire Giant for them just now. Position-wise and control-wise from the Bolts, maybe you can send ScaraDD over to defend, has some somewhat decent clear. Gun can teleport in, which might just be the only bet you have. Otherwise, it's very slow. The Peds are on cooldown and will still be on cooldown for another minute for a majority of the players. BaRRaCCuDDa will have theirs shortly after Fire Giant comes back, but everybody else on the Scarabs going to be a little unfortunately exposed for their sake. Phantom Shells, incredibly important. Inbound's ults have not been able to pull as much, although you can see the timers for Finn and Jake lined up. BaRRaCCuDDa didn't use theirs. Those are going to be pretty massive. A minute just after the Fire Giant respawns, so they're going to be able to use those. Only one Phantom Shell right now on the side of the Scarabs, and it's on Inbound. So BaRRaCCuDDa hasn't been able to upgrade that. Still looking for a lot of the power, looking for that hit. Has 1,100 gold in hand. So I have to imagine either he's going to back and spin that for the upgrade, or is saving up for another big power spike, potentially starting another item here. So I'll keep my eyes on BaRRaCCuDDa, because that, honestly, a small relic, depending on the separation between BaRRaCCuDDa and Inbound, that could make the difference between a win and a loss for a fight.
And then it's 3 Phantom Shells for the Olympus Bolts on the opposite side. 2 of them very close and synced up to their timers, that being the one from Ben and Jake. Inbound finds Venenu with a Riptide.
Well, that could be
Gets
big.
the cleanse out and a River's Rebuke. Ven taking a lot of damage, no Aegis,
huge.
no Shell.
Look at BaRRaCCuDDa.
And he'll be gone. BaRRaCCuDDa forced to airstrike, but he goes right back in towards Stuart, gets picked off by LASBRA. Inbound trying to do his best to keep his team alive, but Jake will pick up BaRRaCCuDDa, throw him inside the cage, and BaRRaCCuDDa is losing all of his health bar. BaRRaCCuDDa picks up the double kill, but he's now got to deal with ScaraDD, who will just take away the last of his HP. BaRRaCCuDDa cannot box into the Raven, and that's a big pick for the Scarabs to keep things alive, but Scream is gone. LASBRA finds the double. ScaraDD holds on to the last of his health. He needs one more hit to take down LASBRA, but he will not find it. All the mitigations of the world are keeping him alive for just a little while longer. Can't sustain up with some of those minions, and just look at what this Ravana is able to do and how long he is delaying the bolts.
The great news, though, I mean, look, delaying the bolts is the key word. No Fire Giant for him, and there's nothing they could do. I mean, otherwise, you're at least looking at some pressure on the Phoenix. With the minion wave as deep as it is, if LASBRA had more health and ScaraDD goes down, if that's a full deicide, they get themselves a Phoenix. ScaraDD does a great job just surviving there. Some of it, yeah, it's the gods. Some of it is the jukes and the positioning, the healing that comes through. The big issue I have with that fight, and it kind of starts, it's well played by BaRRaCCuDDa, because what BaRRaCCuDDa does is pulls people in. Vin, unfortunately, falls down. But BaRRaCCuDDa ults one direction, and you see a couple of members of the Scarabs scramble over there and shift to try and catch where could he go. Stuart, however, was forced to walk the opposite direction, so Stuart's now isolated and alone, and yeah, he's hitting hard, but he had one member of the bolts already stuck to him, and then BaRRaCCuDDa just dashes right back in and is able to bring the same, if not maybe more damage, because of the Wind Demon early in the build, lots of heavier crit, and just hits for a heavier punch with each auto. And that small separation, one thing at the very beginning of the fight, was the difference between a really good pick and potential successful win for the Scarabs there to get themselves a Fire Giant, and the Bolts being able to turn that around into an almost full deicide.
Scarabs regroup to the right, but there is a fire minion wave in left, and that Phoenix will not be able to hold out for very long. So, do the Scarabs send somebody over to left to deal with that final wave? It seems that Scary D will be the one to head that direction. BaRRaCCuDDa can throw out the tornado and deal with the minions, but with Fire Giant buff, BaRRaCCuDDa is melting through the health bar of the Phoenix. The River's Rebuke is out. Jake gets pulled back in, has the lead, and then the ultimate just for extra safety to get out. Scary D not necessary in the fight to actually take part in the damage, but with the Phoenix down to half HP, a teleport in by Scary D now to join the fray. BaRRaCCuDDa's already taken out one. LASBRA has taken out a second one. The chains will only hit BaRRaCCuDDa, and he will beads away from them. It is a 2-for-none trade so far. Inbound is low. Inbound is gone. BaRRaCCuDDa with a big crit. Damn it, Scary D, and 5 will not survive. It is a triple for Barra, and they're going to try and maybe give him one more before this Titan goes down. The Olympus Bolts have turned it around in game number 2. Will tie up the set. And once again, Gore, we are going to a game 3 Scarab set.
Look, that win, I argue, is a 10-foot difference. It is BaRRaCCuDDa turning and going to a tier 1 or a tier 2 and just hiding in mid and backing. And BaRRaCCuDDa turning back towards the Gold Fury fight and getting locked in the cage with Haddix. I think if BaRRaCCuDDa doesn't die there, maybe there's still enough pressure for the Bolts, but it was in such a way that they get that kill, they got a second kill, and then in a 3v5 are able to pretty easily leverage a Gold Fury afterward. And so I think that it starts on one simple play that just grows and separates from there on out. Afterward, they've got enough of a lead that they're able to leverage that into a different objective, into a couple more fights that go their way. And while each one was just a little bit of gold, you know, because it started at like 1,000 gold, and then they got the Pyromancer, and then they got the tier 1 in mid, and eventually it just kind of stacked up until it was like, oh, you're up by 3K now, you can do whatever you want, start the Fire Giant, cool, you're at 5, now you're at 8, and then it just spiraled out of control.
And then from that way on, the Olympus Bolts are able to tie up the set, take game 2, and keep up their trend in game 3. Can the Scarabs find their win again in a third game scenario? We'll find out that right after this break.
Night. Since dusk is not an option, night, because there are like fireflies and stars and sometimes comets and things.
Nighttime, not a big morning person, so.
Nighttime is more fun. Nothing good happens after midnight, and that's why you like to stay up after midnight and do those things. And so nighttime. Daytime is great for getting stuff done, but who wants to get stuff done? I want to have fun, and that's what happens at night.
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 Oh, probably nighttime. I don't know. Like just the wind is like calmer. There's less people. It's kind of more relaxed, I think.
Nighttime, 100%. Who wants to be out there in the day? The sun is hot. Like, just let me be a night owl forever.
I am a night person for sure. I do my best work at the end of the day, which is unfortunate because everyone else goes home, and then I will be up till 4 in the morning. So night, 100%.
I'm a night guy. Yeah. I like daytime for the most part. It's really cool, but the sun is actually actively trying to kill me. The moon is too, but it's worse at it.
I like day more. I think like if it was like morning or night, I would choose night, but you gotta go with day. I mean, you gotta get some sun, a little bit of vitamin D. But night does hit different though. I mean, late night drive or something like that, but I'm gonna have to go with day.
Day. I love the day. I love when the sun is out. I can enjoy the weather. Day for sure.
I'm definitely more of a night owl for sure. You know, given the choice, I'd stay up late rather than wake up early. So yeah, I'm going with night for sure.
Night. Definitely night. A lot cooler. Not as many people. Big fan of that.
Night. It's so much prettier. The bright light, it hurts.
Die!
a few things guaranteed in this life. Dave and Miff, who knows, going out of control. Just you and I going out of control on the desk. Solar Scarabs going to Game 3. And me letting you know about Alienware, one of our sponsors here in Season 9 of the SMITE Pro League. And all of us here powered by Alienware. I got all my stats on the desk. There is so much in here. Any weaker computer couldn't handle it. So I got the top of the line thing to let me know everything that's going on. And you at home can have the same benefit right on your lap, right at your desk. If you head on over to smitegame.com/Alienware and use code AWSMITE09 for discounts on select Alienware gear. Thanks again to Alienware for powering us and the players here in Season 9 of the SMITE Pro League. The Bolts felt pretty powered by Alienware here in this one. LASBRA has a great game. Snowballs BaRRaCCuDDa into the late. And the Olympus Bolts send us on to a game number 3. Miff, it seems like we always arrive here one way or another. And it's the Solar Scarabs fighting for a win in their third game of the set.
A contentious game, too, to be sure. At least throughout the early portions. I believe 3-3 is a slash line, going in around that 8 or 9 minute mark. But by the time the Olympus Bolts were able to make their way to the first objective, it just felt like they had figured out compositionally how to address the Solar Scarabs. LASBRA, as you said, has a phenomenal game for himself, a 9 KDA, very much so facilitated, I think, again, by the composition of the Scarabs, lacking a bit in that CC immunity. Awesome Jake as well. Even like 24 minutes in the game was second highest damage output at like 8,800. Very impressive from him. But the main issue, I think, for the Solar Scarabs, and it's an issue that I had with Ven in Game 1 that got rectified by Sands of Time, was a distinct lack of CDR. Watch base defenses from the Solar Scarabs. I'm looking at them like, all right, BaRRaCC threw out a tornado. Let me count to 14. Throws out another tornado. Count to 14. Neither one of those two tornadoes hit, by the way. Third one does. Just a little bit more throughout the early. Just a little bit of CDR, I think, would go a long way. Just so you're allowed to miss one of those tornadoes.
CDR gremlin?
Yes, dude. There's a reason. Look at these builds, man. Everybody else is building CDR, like literally everyone, except for Scary D.
Well, BaRRaCC would have gotten it eventually. The Bumba's hammer.
Yeah, 30 minutes in.
All right, so you're not a CDR gremlin. What's a thing that, like, maybe a gremlin? You don't feed them after midnight is the thing.
Mogwai?
Like, are trolls something that, like, need
well,
to
I'm
be
not
fed?
a troll.
No, of course not. Never.
I think you're talking about the Mogwai. They become gremlins if you feed them after midnight.
Oh, I haven't seen that movie in years. I thought the gremlins were the good ones. And the Mogwai were the post-midnight ones.
Look, I don't think there's good or bad. There's simply circumstance.
Fair enough, Miff. Fair enough.
We live
in
in
the
a world of
circumstance of our current set, it's Game 3 between the Olympus Bolts and the Solar Scarabs. Again, adjustments to be made here. It seems to be the way these sets go, sometimes even for the Bolts as well. No team in the league feels immune to this, where Game 1, pretty heavily in favor of one team. You answer back pretty convincingly yourself, and then you go into a Game 3, everything slows down, and we take a deep breath moving forward. So I wouldn't be surprised we see a little bit of late game prioritized here. And picks and bans for game number 3 between the Solar Scarabs and the Olympus Bolts. Adjustments to be made, to be sure. If the Bolts feel like they are tired of dealing with Bobby's Yemoja, if that is left open, as the Solar Scarabs are in first pick for the 3rd game in a row, you better believe that the Solar Scarabs are considering that. Which is wild to me. I mean, look at the SPL. Top SPL ban is Yemoja for good reason. It's got like a high 80s, nearly 90% win rate through almost 20 games.
Might have got to 90% if Bobby won that one.
It was at 89, I think, after the Game 1 win.
That's right.
Drops probably back down to mid to high 80s after that. But the Bolts all right with it. Looks like they're going to let it through again. I do wonder, and a good adjustment again, maintained adjustment by the Bolts to keep the Eset off the table. I wonder, you go in Yemoja 3 games in a row. You sure are. 83, man. One loss plummets the win rate, doesn't
Bobby
it?
is tanking Yemoja's stock value, man.
I mean, that stinks. That percentages work that way. One win gets it up to like 1% higher, but a loss drops it down 6%. That's unbelievable.
I don't think that's how percentages work.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Like no, I'm not gonna talk theoretical math with you.
What do you mean? It's exactly how it happened. It was an 89%
something
win rate.
must have gone wrong. I don't trust that.
It was an 89% win rate just
What was
prior.
it before he won?
What?
What was it before he won?
88.
88,
When
went
he
to
picked it in
89
game 1, and then it went to 89.
after he won, and then
And
he
now it's
lost,
down
and it
to
went
8.
down by 7%.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
I don't know what to tell
Disagree.
you. All right. You're not disagreeing with me. I'm just telling you what's on the screen, Myth. That's
Okay.
all. So you're disagreeing with someone out there in the void, but it's not me.
That's
I
right.
promise. Yemoja is the pick. We can agree on that for the Solar Scarabs. 1 win, 1 loss so far for Inbound in this set. And the Bolts have loved the Xing Chen. Went for it in game 1, didn't work out. Went back to it in game 2. Obviously a better result that time around. Wonder if you stick with the Xing Chen 3 games in a row.
I mean, he was like top damage for 20 entire minutes. So hard to argue against a stat line like that, as well as the initiation. I wouldn't be over surprised if Xing Chen is locked in, but I think getting LASBRA a comfortable pick, very important for the Olympus Bolts. Daji targeted by the Solar Scarabs, one of LASBRA's favorites. A heavy CC seems to be one of the win conditions for the Bolts out of the jungle. Erlang Shen fits that style, but the Bolts themselves take it off the table. Xing Chen is the lock-in, first overall, and a Muzen Cobb yet again. And it does feel like the Olympus Bolts are slated to put that Muzen Cobb in mid, but the Solar Scarabs could force a flex here based on picks or bans if the Olympus Bolts don't take their dedicated hunter selection in that 3rd slot.
Oh, Miff, you were right. I don't know if you saw it. Tyler's update. Mogwai are the cute ones and the gremlins are the mean ones. I always thought they were just Furbies and there was just one.
No, you're conflating, man. Trolls, Mogwai, Gremlins, and Furbies are like literally all different brands.
Okay, yes. Okay, I know that, right. Furbies are creepy. I don't know if you ever had one.
Mogwai were creepy too.
Yeah, but that's a movie. I'm talking about Furby, a real life Furby. Did you ever own one?
No.
Those things like would wake up in the middle of the night and start laughing and begging for food, and it's like
Oh,
4
like
in the morning.
like an Alexa.
Does your Alexa wake you up and beg for food at 4 in the morning?
That doesn't happen to you?
No.
Oh. I will be returning it then.
Yeah, you need to send that one back. You just got someone on the other end messing with you, Myth. Xbalanque continued draft for the Source, continued to be picked up here for the Solar Scarabs. Kukulkan ends up being the pick. So Xbalanque plus Kukulkan again for the Solar Scarabs, Myth. Seems like a team that, despite not finding consistent, continued success in game number 2 with this draft, are going to go right back to it.
I'm willing to bet he's not going to build CDR. So, I would like to see the Solar Scarabs around this Kukulkan just draft a whole lot of pressure. Because that's what made it work originally when we saw that 8-0 and 10 performance from BaRRaCCuDDa. It was because he had established such a lead that Bumba's hammer was finished around that 22 to 23 minute mark. As long as CDR is getting purchased at any point before the end of the game, I'm pretty happy about it. It's just a very inconsistent kit by large from Kukulkan, right? The only thing that you're able to really confirm landing yourself is Zephyr. Otherwise, Tornado, you're kind of hoping for a little bit of user error on the opposition's half, or Speed of the 9 Winds. You need some CC lockdown from your own teammates. So, pressure could get you that lead that you would really need to get that Bumba's Hammer online in a timely fashion. Otherwise, I mean, Chronos Pendant's still incredibly strong. Breastplate of Valor synergizes really well with Kukulkan's passive and gives you CDR with power and defense, which would help out against, I suppose, the Muzen Cobb if it is headed towards mid, and I think it is now that Olorun's been locked in. So I am curious to see the rest of this draft.
Look, Olorun has been pretty banned out by the Solar Scarabs. Another really high win rate god in the Olorun. A couple gods seem to just be running the show here. Olorun, one of them, 70% win rate. Yemoja tanks to an 83 after being at an 88 just a couple of games ago. Kali plus Robin banned out by the Bolts. And on the flip side, some soul laners get taken away. And so, still remains some flexibility, Myth, for the Olympus Bolts here, where, of course, Xing Chen could synergize well with what Awesome Jake wants to do. Haddix could absolutely play this pick, has been one game of each so far here in this set. And it looks like the Solar Scarabs getting the idea that that'll end up being an Awesome Jake, Xing Chen, and something else for Haddix a bit down the stretch. Now, Fenrir is interesting here, Myth. That is something that LASBRA has played a little bit of as well. I think probably one just outside of the last 6 games. And it is a pick that he's looked good on this year.
It is, and looking at the draft from the Solar Scarabs, Yemoja doesn't really have a great answer to brutalize. Xbalanque, not a great answer. Kukulkan's answer is to summon a dragon just on your feet, and there's not really much you can do about it. It's a DPS race between Fenrir and Kukulkan themselves. So maybe we see this Fenrir put his attention slightly elsewhere, as long as that ultimate is down. Pretty easy to chase out throughout the early.
They can't escape the Kukulkan Kukulkan. The Kukulkan,
that's
the
tough.
Kukulkan.
That's tough.
Our poor casters just can't get away from it. I have luckily avoided it throughout this year. I think this Horus really changes the dynamic.
Time to get in there and mix it up.
Because Myth, where in the world is everything going? Yemoja, X-Ball duo lane, Horus jungle, or Kukulkan jungle? That's the question.
If I had to pick one of those two to go in the jungle.
And you have to. I'm forcing you to pick one.
I mean, like, Horus has got better ganks because he's just got more CC that isn't tied to his ultimate. But Horus also has superior lane clear, matchup against the Achilles. Yeah, man, I think that might just be Horus jungle.
Are you sold?
Am I convinced that that's like
say
a good
say it is
pick?
Horus? Yeah, right. Say it is a Horus jungle. Are you sold on it?
No.
Are you sold on Kukulkan jungle? Let's play both options
no.
here. Not sold on either.
Both are pretty poor jungle options, and I think that's been made explicitly clear by the lack of them in the jungle from any other team in the league.
Yeah, there's something to be said for creativity, though, Myth.
There sure is.
And every so often, the curveball of a pick can catch the opposing team off guard.
You gotta hope. If you're a Scarabs fan.
You sure do. The Olympus Bolts get the Achilles. Again, you would assume over in the solo lane for Haddix. Feels like a very Haddix-y pick. Something that he can hopefully get some lane pressure on, but also in team fights, chain those fatal strikes together, reinitiate, get some lockdown, some good damage as well. Do you have something to add on, Myth? Or?
You know, I'm looking at it, and Horus does synergize with Kukulkan. Like, you've at least got the CC lockdown, the stun into a knockup,
And
inside a
suddenly
tornado,
you're
and a Spear of the
convincing
Nine Winds. No, I think that there are a whole lot of junglers that have got CC that aren't Horus. But if I have to stretch myself to justify a Horus in the jungle, that's one way to do it. Makes it really easy to land that ultimate for Kukulkan.
Look, and that's what you need from BaRRaCCuDDa, right? If you're not going to be building all this CDR, if you're going to be spamming a tornado,
he gets one an hour, you better land
every
that
once
one.
in a while, you better be hitting the ones that you end up getting if you're the Solar Scarabs. Let's flip it, though. Let's talk about the Olympus Bolts. This is a much more consistent draft, Myth. And I'm nervous that your overwhelming bias and hard-headedness
oh my goodness,
is going to have you saying the Bolts draft is just better because you're not sold on the Horus jungle.
Well,
which is not unfair, I guess, if it genuinely is better because Horus jungle is bad.
I think if you looked at these drafts,
yeah,
anybody could be playing that Olympus Bolts draft. Right? Because a lot of teams are drafting each one of these pieces individually.
Drafting that, right.
Whereas you look at the Solar Scarabs draft, and not many people are drafting all of this together. Each individual piece is still pretty good. As far as late game, let's say we get to the 45-minute mark from a dead even place. Like, it is even across the board. Everybody's 6 items slotted. I think both of these compositions have got similar power levels, but the ability to get to that late game and how quickly you will get to that portion of the match where you're just outpacing all favors the Olympus Bolts.
Well, compositional fun has not ended for the day. Going into Game 3, the unique jungler for the Solar Scarabs hopes to find them a win.
Gordon, did I hear him? Did he say 45 minutes? Yeah. Even in order for this to be a kind of a close bout between them late game? Yeah. Is he putting he's putting a curse on us now that we're gonna have to go through 45 minutes of play. Game 3 between the Solar Scarabs and the Olympus Bolts.
I'm glad you hung on that. Dave said compositional fun, and I had to come to some sort of agreement with my brain that for some reason it went to math, and I don't know. I don't know if I like that. I don't know if I like that. That's what my brain did.
I don't want to go to math either.
I disagree with me.
There's a reason that I stopped doing math technically, as I stopped doing required math in high school, and then I tested out so I didn't have to do it in college. I had
to do a lot of math.
I did my one AP class in high school for calculus, and got me
For some reason, they say, hey, computer science, you guys need to know how numbers work.
What?
And you need to know a lot of it. I asked my TI. I was when we were in Computer Science 102, I said, when are we going to use any of this solving integrals and all this, like the 35 different ways that they teach you in Calc 2?
I tell you, they said
and they told me that if you go into grad school for animation and you have to make a donut, and I'm like, come on, man, like how many programs am I writing with this? What? Now all the logic and stuff that we did from like discrete math, I loved that stuff. Proofs could have, you know, proofs can bugger off forever, but yeah, that's my math rant for right now.
There we go. Well, we got
for those of you in computer science, I stand in solidarity.
I'm glad I only took my one computer science intro and then like level 1 after that in high school and stopped beyond there. Then I went into graphic design and I got to learn how color theory and everything works. Got to get yelled at by a professor who basically told us, yeah, you're going to be more likely to get a B or a C in my class than anything else. You're only going to get an A if you're like exceptional and you go like above and beyond. It's like, that's a great way to start my first semester of college. But let's jump into game 3 now that we've killed almost 2 minutes of time talking about the days of old for us. It's a lot of the same, at least in the duel.
That old. Wait, I'm a month older than you. We're not that old, J-Mac.
Look, everybody says we're old, okay? Mifflin says we're old. Trulli says we're old.
Miflin's the age of my little sister. That doesn't count. I'm not 30 yet.
Old compared to my sister. God. Yeah, no, we're not.
I'm old compared to a newborn baby, but young compared to the people running the country.
Look, it blew my mind that we're in the years. It blows my mind that we're now in the year where like people can legally drink who have been born in this millennia. That's where it hit me as to like, man, where is our time gone? And look at this, we killed another 30 seconds. We're 2.5 minutes in. Let's try and steer ourselves back into the game. Not a whole lot's happened over in the duel lane. It's pretty much the same as exactly what's been going on for majority of games 1 and games 2. We'll see maybe if there's a change up for BaRRaCCuDDa's build, as once again Mifflin calling for more CDR in the build as far as this Kukulkan is concerned, to try and get some more of those tornadoes off. But I think they brought up a real good concern on the desk about dealing with LASBRA as a whole. Nobody except for Scarabs and Scream can really deal with that brutalizing. It will require Scream to use one of his own dashes to stop it.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch how like the small interruptions could happen. I mean, technically Inbound can stop it with like a stun, right? If he's able to hit it on himself, things like that. And so there's going to be opportunities for them. But yeah, just in terms of can you escape the Fenrir, a lot of work to be done for the Scarabs. I also think that you have to factor in like CC immunity, where they're going to be finding it. A lot of beads necessary on the side of the Scarabs, because otherwise that's just a free Ragnarok. But then the follow-up from a Xing Chen, or vice versa, the two of them working in tandem, it's going to be a lot of opportunities for the Bolts in team fights to be able to find that. And those three, those two, I should say, LASBRA and Jake, they'll find themselves together a lot in this fight. So the Scarabs, specifically, I'm looking at BaRRaCCuDDa, unfortunately here for Inbound, Scream as well on that list. Those three in that 3v3 are going to have to worry about the CC chain and CC capabilities that the Bolts have. Plus, there's a stinger in there. Like, just if I want to make the 3v3 even more threatening, Muzen Cobb just hits hard.
I mean, pick up anybody with Ragnarok if you can. Likely Inbound to be the primary target. Scream if he can't get into his ult fast enough to deal with it. BaRRaCCuDDa does have a set of beads to get away, but if anybody gets caught by LASBRA, that's a stinger waiting for him on the back end, and probably death for any of these squishier characters. Even Scream, even though the fact that he is a warrior has built into damage early, first item, Golden Blade for him. Keep your eyes out on where LASBRA's putting that pressure.
Specifically this as well. Tossback's like, I don't know, that Inbound, well, he's getting low.
The Orb's doing a lot, but a Riptide. Make sure you can get out. Ultimate from, or dash, I should say, from Stuart. Looks like he got interrupted there. That gets a River's Rebuke, and Jake will just jump to avoid the damage from it. Now Inbound put in a bit of an awkward spot. Ultimate in by Scream, though, as he's made the rotation in. Now gets the ultimate out of BaRRaCCuDDa. Scream goes in, and the slowest Horus combo of your life. Beads gone by BaRRa, but he walks into the minion wave, and the damage from the 1 and the Golden Blade procs get first blood for the Scarabs.
Good gank, man. Look, that's something that Scream's going to be able to do, and sometimes it's not going to be just him. I mean, that is not an ultimate very similar to a Thor dunk, right? You show up, but you can bring people with you. Yes, it has a little bit longer of a channel time, and it's not going to have the CC at the other end, but I do think specifically watching like rotations between Scream and BaRRaCCuDDa are going to be interesting for exactly that. And like you said, the Olorun showcases its prowess. Unfortunately, still goes down there for BaRRa, so maybe doesn't get to flex as much as he would have liked on him. But you also get to see the, like you said, the slowest Horus combo. I mean, slowed down. Stuart uses beads just to get out of that ult. which is going to open, again, opportunities for Jake or LASBRA if they show up over there. I think that what we got to see is the reason you want to shut down an Olorun and a reason to go back.
Oh, well, goodbye Scream, goodbye damage. BaRRaCCuDDa clips both of them with the Serpent of the Nine wins, but not going to find the follow kill just yet. LASBRA trying to find a way to get over the wall with the Brutalize. Manages to barely squeak by. BaRRaCCuDDa doesn't have that spit for the combo. Beads burned by LASBRA to get away from the Riptide. Haddix on rotation. Could cause some issues. Just being in a poke on towards Scary D. Inbound is within threshold, and Venenu got that stinger back through all of that fighting. Somehow, again, Inbound just barely makes his way out.
I mean, that was narrowly another kill there for the Scarabs. Great beads by LASBRA. Again, burning them maybe doesn't feel too great, but the reaction time to make sure you don't get plucked up by that Riptide was just on point. Now, able to continue running around the map, putting that pressure wherever he wants it.
Dies. Scary D dies. Who's going to get the kill? It'll be LASBRA with the Brutalize. Just wondering if Haddix would expend the ultimate to take credit for that one, but he does not. He'll give it over to his jungler. 101 now for LASBRA. And a kill for Venenu in the mid lane. BaRRaCCuDDa has been now left to be stuck under the tier 1 tower. Inbound will soak up a little bit of that extra farm, but Olympus Bolts off to a small lead, about 500 gold to their name.
Honestly, I like seeing where they're able to put it. Pressure on to Scream has been pretty massive, and that's going to be the thing. I think late game, though, this Horus is still going to be able to do a lot. I'm curious to watch how this build unfolds. We've seen Horus support. We've seen Horus solo. Have not seen Horus jungle, at least in my experience. No. So that is going to be a fun one to watch, how Scream makes this one work. And how it transitions specifically into like Pro League play, right? Like, watching it in maybe a ranked game or anything like that could potentially lean like, okay, well, here's the like general style of play. But this is going to be a lot more specific, right? Like, how do you take it into this matchup and find a win or hope to find a win over the Bolts here? And I think a lot of it, I like the idea of the double to triple ganks that you could potentially have. Horus, look, that too is maybe one of my favorite abilities in the game. You've got some healing in there to help you stick onto people, but more specifically, you've got Prot Shred in your kit. And so as a jungler, you can go in, shred some protections, make it so that BaRRaCCuDDa and Stuart, and technically yourself with the build he's going, hit a little harder. And then you've got a knock-up, good disruption, a lot of fun things in the kit. It's just going to be about whether or not it can be consistent enough and surviving enough that he can kind of stick to this front line like he needs to.
Scream goes in, beats from Venenu, River's Rebuke out of Inbound, and an ult from BaRRaCCuDDa will clip one. Venenu low, one more hit, and it'll be Inbound who grabs that one out. LASBRA goes for the Brutalize, but just a little off the mark. The Solar Scarabs find a clean pick with a few ultimates within the mid lane, even Stuart using his ultimate to get some credit for that assist. The Scarabs tie up the kills. The gold still remains over to the Bolts for now.
What I now want to see, though, from the Bolts, I mean, that's a good kill from the Scarabs. Bolts, beads were just used by BaRRaCCuDDa. I want to see LASBRA getting active. You know, we've seen him over the solo lane, like you said, 1-0-1. But now you've got a very prime target for your Ragnarok that you can just hand-deliver to an Muzen Gob. And it feels like it should be and could be a very easy scoop for your team just to be able to find a small win and potentially some power. Unfortunate there for Stuart. I don't know if he would have truly wanted that fight since Sanctified Fields were up, but does not stall BaRRaCCuDDa from the back and doesn't maybe buy some time for that Trebuchet to continue pushing forward.
I still have the thought in my mind that Mifflin said 45 minutes earlier. I don't know why that's sticking with me, but I hope we're not going to be hitting a 45 when it comes to these two teams out here.
Well, I was going to say 45 minutes stuck listening to me, which depending on your opinion of me in chat,
that's a blessing.
I was going to say it's either great or bad. Like 2 a.m. trying to go to sleep, my wife hates it.
But here at work, it's an absolute pleasure. It's an absolute treat for me. Hopefully for fans at home as well. Solar Scarabs, though, 2-2 on the board. A nice pick for Scream over on the left side of the map. And a nice pick for Inbound in that mid lane during that skirmish. And only about 75 more seconds till BaRRaCCuDDa's beads are back up. I think you're right to call it. The LASBRA should start making a motion towards one of those lanes. Ult by Stuart. And not even needing the beads as the stun was not there. Scream goes up into the sky and goes over towards the purple buff. Almost stole that. I think I saw 2 HP on that, so Scream narrow margins from stealing that one away, but that's an ult down for the jungler and for the hunter.
Yeah, honestly, I think it's going to be, well, could be some opening potential. Beads back up for Stuart, so LASBRA maybe doesn't have as many angles to work there. Again, put some pressure on mid, BaRRaCCuDDa's going to be pretty easy to pick up. Right now wouldn't be a great time because the rest of your team's on the Pyromancer. But they are able to create a lot of space here as the Bolts.
Very D has a means to get in, at least pulls the Bolts off the Pyromancer. BaRRaCCuDDa drops his Tornado, but with the Pyromancer not leashed, it's just going to regen its HP. Scary D still dealing with Haddix. These Soul Laners just slapping each other for the last few minutes. And now with just the threat that came from inbound stun, Haddix had to use that ultimate. One of the first times this game used it defensively to get himself out. So the Pyromancer held back, at least for the time.
Again, small windows, little avenues that I thought the Bolts could potentially pull themselves even further ahead. Did disappear, right? But beads are back up for BaRRaCCuDDa, little things like that. Ults are coming back up for Stuart. Scream will have theirs pretty soon anyway. I still, you know, I'm enjoying the watch so far from both of these teams, just because of the patience they're playing. Again, for both of them, a win is going to be big, maybe bigger for the Scarabs. LASBRA's going to pick up Scream.
Picks up Screams right into a stinger from the Muzen Cobb. Scream will go down, and maybe even inbound as well. Surf for the 9 wins, plus Scary D in the backline. Does manage to find a pick onto LASBRA. Venenu gets out by thin margins. It's a 1-for-1 trade. Both junglers go down. Quite a lot expended from both teams to get that.
I was going to say, double beads down now from Vin and LASBRA. A couple of ults, but LASBRA going jungle for jungle. Beads maintained by mid lane over on the other side. So the Scarabs, I want to say, eke out a little bit ahead there. But again, the entire math for the scales comes out pretty much right as even as could be. And so it is going to be a little more neutral for them. Maybe some open opportunities over the next couple of minutes to help skew things back in their favor if you're the Scarabs. You know, it's been fighting kind of a little behind the entire time. We saw that goal, anything less than 1,000 is usually pretty manageable, no matter what stage of the game. And certain points, it becomes negligible, right? Like anything within 1,000 doesn't mean anything. And so it is still an okay spot for the Scarabs. But I think you're noticing some of the weaknesses, which is that Scream, because he has to go in so deep with the build that he has currently, while it can hit pretty hard, is still going to need a little bit of tankiness to survive what is the onslaught of the Bolts otherwise.
It's a Hydra's second item from Scream, now building in towards what I imagine will be Glad Shield for him, so
Yeah.
a little bit of defensive stats, but a little bit of power as well to his name. Jump in by Laz, and a Ragnarok used, but not going to find any value from that one. Big cooldown. Now taken from LASBRA, and that seems to be the call for the Scarabs to get aggressive. Jake goes in with the ult, only finds one. It's a Horus ult to land back in. Jake now in no defenses to it. Name of Sphere of the 9 wins, almost clips Venenu, but he sidesteps backwards. BaRRaCCuDDa finds the pick onto Jake, and the Scarabs with one little miss ult by LASBRA can turn that around for a pick.
Now with the amount of control they have, might be able to wiggle into a Pyromancer, but I like this. Get the kill, back up, and make sure everybody stays alive. The only thing that I can latch onto there as a criticism for the Scarabs really comes down to BaRRaCCuDda's ult, which is to say that Scream's going to have a stun, and you know that there's going to be someone you could more than likely guaranteed hit. But I don't know how much of that was for the damage, because, you know, Jake's going to die there no matter what. But keeping the rest of the Bolts away, making sure that you cut that path off, again, narrow jungle corridors, you called it, almost clips Vin. It's to the point where if Vin steps forward, gets into that fight faster, takes a huge chunk of damage as an easy second kill, or he stays out of it and they just get their kill and get out. So I like the way that it's used from the Scarabs. I like their presence of mind overall. And being able to find and capitalize on the moments that otherwise I would argue the Bolts had missed out on, right? When you know that there are beads down, when you know there are ults down, or that you have some control over a team fight that the Bolts won't be able to fight back, take advantage of it, and they've done exactly that.
Stuart versus BaRRaCCuDDa. Do we get a fight between the Hunters? No. No, we don't. Now with LASBRA Ven on the way. Inbound. Gets picked up by the Ragnarok. Drops to a sanctified field, and that's going to be curtain call for the support. But that was 4 ultimates. Maybe a bit overkill to grab inbound for Venenu. His will be back up in about 10 seconds for the pickup from that stinger, but I don't know what Inbound said to them in the hallway between games 2 and 3, but they were not happy about it. And now the Olympus Bolts can start up the Gold Fury.
Bolts wanted him dead. They got him extra dead. This could be the big play, though. Just off timer, but look at the damage from BaRRaCCuDDa. Unfortunate. It's not going to result in anything. Narrow miss on the Gold Fury just in terms of timing. So the Scarabs, I think, showcase that they still have a bunch of punchbacks, but that's what the Bolts wanted there, right? It's a heavy investment for a big reason.
Walks in, beats, and Aegis available. Only used the Aegis on the jump from LASBRA. I recognize there's somebody lurking within the jungle. But the Olympus Bolts with the Gold Fury, with the Tier 1 tower, we see the lead slightly tip back over their way. 1,200 gold up for the Olympus Bolts, and we get us closer to that 2,000 mark with this Pyromancer. And this was the pacing that happened in game number 2.
Yeah.
Sits even or what across the way, but once the Bolts got that first lead, it then became the slippery slope down for the Solar Scarabs.
Well, and I think in game 2, right, it's a little bit of questionable play, like a fight that maybe didn't need to be taken from the Scarabs. This time, the fight got brought to them. They had no choice. The fight was going to happen, and the Bolts made sure it happened. Just an easy opening to a Gold Fury, into a tower, into a Pyromancer. That is a huge amount of gold to just all of a sudden shift into their dynamic. And again, you know, for parts of the game, you tend to see the amount that matters shift, and right now 2,000-ish, give or take. It's noticeable enough, right, for the Bolts that they're going to be able to start solidifying some items over, or relics over, the Scarabs. And with the way the fights have been going, I think that we have a lot of potential for some good fights from the Scarabs. We just haven't gotten to see the full 5-on-5 yet.
LASBRA drops a ward in the jungle immediately, de-warded by the Scarabs as they were all waiting around the corner for anybody to walk through. It won't be CDR, and it won't be Pen for BaRRaCCuDDa's third item. Instead, it's a Polynomicon. Inbound picked up by Awesome Jake. Inbound locked in the middle of 4. Riptide will get him out. 0-9 wins, just off the mark from hitting Venenu. And Inbound low, but Scream is there just in case the ultimate from Haddix would have gone through, but Haddix saw the body block ready and used his ult instead to turn around.
I mean, being able to, again, separate a little bit. BaRRaCCuDDa would love to get more damage and maybe more kills off the ult, but I think that right now, especially with this kind of build, what you're doing is making sure that your teammates get out alive. Inbound is a big player to keep on board. Bracer just now finished. I was wondering what the second relic was going to be. I'm honestly still wondering for Jake. Jake hasn't picked one up. But if Inbound had gotten something like the beads, you know, to try and combat some of the CC chains that he's been stuck in, could have been big. Ideally, I think at this point, leaning very heavily into the I'm a tank, hopefully I'll just survive. Unfortunately, for some of these fights, we haven't seen it, but 1-1 and 3, not a bad slash line. So I think that if they can keep this pace, they'll be fine. But definitely something to be aware of if you're a Scarabs player right now, is the potential deaths.
Into the duo lane with BaRRaCCuDDa. Finds the knock-up, beads out, or is immuned out by Jake. The dash just off the mark by Scream. Nothing more beyond there. That's an ult and a beads burned away from the jungle of the Scarabs for just the ult out of Awesome Jake. Trebuchet in mid gets absolutely no value as the Olympus Bolts are able to clear that one out easily. And the Olympus Bolts are slowly crawling that gold lead out. 2,500 now. And we saw a slight tease over to the right lane, even 3K experience up for them. We saw a slight tease towards the right lane for LASBRA, and maybe that's why we see Scream make that rotation left, but I mean, there's no Fury up, Fire Giant is available, Olympus Bolts, they could have potentially made a capitalizing on that one.
Yeah, knowing like you had two people in duo, like for Jake and BaRRaCCuDDa, maybe makes it a little easier for them. Yeah, the rotation time maybe would have taken a little too long for them, but at the same time, you get a big win out of that fight, even without, like, no kills happen. But like you said, you burn beads and ult, both long cooldowns there for Scream. BaRRaCCuDDa didn't have his ult. I'm actually appreciative that BaRRaCCuDDa didn't beads there. I feel like Scream could have held on to theirs as well, just because even if you do both pop it, BaRRaCCuDDa was so far back, you know, the likelihood of getting the damage there without BaRRaCCuDDa's ult isn't really that high, and locking down just Jake might not be worth it.
Haddix will eat the ultimate from BaRRaCCuDDa. This time his beads a little bit late. Quarter HP on the soul laner. Riptide to pull him back in. Scream's ult is back in, and he's brought BaRRaCCuDDa with him. Another stun onto Haddix, and Scary D gets the last clip of damage out there. Inbound low, but Inbound will be out of the bees. Not quite enough. Scream gets back in with that heal. Make sure that the support stays alive. Scarabs find one pick.
And honestly, I think that's the other half of this, right? Splash damage. Look, Horus splash damage is going to be nice. And while it might not be the main focus here for Scream, he's not necessarily going for full-on support. He's got good damage based on this build. That's going to be helpful in moments exactly like that one, right? A little bit of tick damage, maybe one more hit, and Inbound goes down, but Scream's able to help keep some people alive. Same for BaRRaCCuDDa. They'll feed off each other as the game goes on. Talk about a Fire Giant buff a little later. If they manage to get that with the amount of sustain they have, it'll be great for Phoenix Eaters.
LASBRA picks up Inbound, drops in another Sanctified Field. Inbound does not have ult, and a stun just off the marker. Riptide throws him against the wall, and that's not the wall that he wanted to go to. Scary D now locked in place. Tornado giving him a little bit of defense towards his name, but with 4 moves of the bolts and LASBRA jumping back in, ScaraDD gets the transform, gets that shield. LASBRA now beads and egg is out. Scream thrown to the wolves, and BaRRaCCuDDa picks up the kill. Now the bolts resurge forward. Stuart eats the knockup, does not have his beads, does have his Aegis, bites back with as many autos as he can, but ScaraDD finds a nice route to set up for BaRRaCC. Serpent of the Nine wins. Not going to find anything that time. BaRRaCCuDDa is going to go down to Venenu.
Once again, just a weird fight from the Scarabs, right? You know, Inbound goes in, is isolated. Scream tries to make the saving play. Inbound goes down, and now Scream's the one who's out of position. Or sorry, Inbound's dead. ScaraDD's the one who's getting got on. They're jumping on him. About a third HP, and you see Scream go in for the saving play. Just ends up kind of trading out who dies there. And then it's the chase down. BaRRaCCuDDa tries to stick around to make sure he can be there for some peel for the team, but it ends up just being out of position afterward. It's the same play that if you watch a lot of Scarabs games, almost always is where their fights fall apart. It's just the wanting to be the hero. You want to be able to turn things even, but sometimes if someone's that far up, you just got to let them die, and I think in that circumstance, you got to trust ScaraDD to either get out, or you really are trusting that your teammate are going to have your back, because I just don't think they had the damage quite ready. Not everybody was on the same page. And unfortunately, it's almost always some variant of that. Sometimes it's Inbound the one who dies and Scream or ScaraDD the ones who go in and die afterward, but then it's just a domino effect from that point forward. And unfortunately for the Scarabs, already behind a fight like that, I mean, that masses way more power for the Bolts here. You're talking not just experience and almost true experience for a lot of it. 3 levels in the jungle, you've got a level in mid, 2 levels for the supports, but you're getting a massive chunk of gold in your favor just off of this. You've got a Fire Giant buff to knock down 5 towers. I mean, team fight potential-wise, this is one of the best positions for the Bolts. Now, I'll go back to what I was saying last game, and that is that trying to knock down a Phoenix with this Fire Giant buff without a minion wave is going to be, honestly, even with a minion wave, it's going to be just close to impossible. I think that BaRRaCCuDDa has a lot of damage. The ult can connect, and the tornado's too much. Plus with Stuart, plus with Scream, I think that trying to go for one of the birds might be a little bit overkill. But if they win a fight around a tier 2, that could change everything for the Bolts.
LASBRA on the side of the jungle. Tier 2 tower goes down. The Bolts will disengage from the left lane. Now with both towers taken away, more pocketing gold for them. And just stripping away the jungle as they make their motions over towards the mid lane. Oni minions starting to push up on the right and mid. Still some in left, but they'll have to deal with the Phoenix later on. And LASBRA can even kind of rotate himself back to the backside of the fight once again. Keep your eyes on him and Jake. Going for a full wraparound as Jake does go in with the ultimate. Only picks up Inbound again in the Sanctified Field. And there's just been no answer for the Solar Scarabs on this ultimate every single time. It has just been a 1-2 combo from Jake and BaRRaCCuDDa to lock someone out.
That's what you lock in an Olorun for, right? You want this ult that is going to be game-changing, that's going to win you team fights. You've got several others, again, the CC heavy side, that's already great. And so what happens? If they burn their beads for a Sanctified ult, or a Sanctified Fields, that you just go in as Jake or LASBRA.
Haddix goes in, LASBRA finds 2 with the stun. Stuart uses Aegis, uses his beads, not quite yet, but he doesn't get a chance to get them out there, batting away with any autos he can. And it's Venenu to put him down. Inbound, 3 seconds till he's back up. Left Phoenix gone, and the Olympus Bolts out of the base.
Hindsight's 20/20, and maybe there's something they were waiting on. But I see that stun, and admittedly, it's a lose-lose. You get hit by that stun in your Stuart, let's say you beads immediately. Cool. LASBRA just goes to his ult, or Jake goes into their ult and they pick you up. Although now that we know they were both down.
Scream to the back line, finds 2 with the ult. BaRRaCCuDDa will be fine though. 4 Scarabs and down Stuart. Jake picks up Inbound, picks up ScaraDD. Riptide gets both of them back to the safety of the Phoenix. The Olympus Bolts are slowly burning away this bird. Yeah. A couple more autos ought to take it down, and it will fall. Another double stun from LASBRA. ScaraDD cannot escape. BaRRaCCuDDa, low HP, stunned down. Aegis gone, and Life Bar gone. Haddix picks up the kill for the Bolts. The Titan started up by the Olympus Bolts. Only Scream and Inbound left to defend. Stuart has just now made his way back in. No Darkest of Night shoes, but look at the health bar on the Titan with a Sanctified Field. The Olympus Bolts, they go down game 1. They bring it back game 2. And in game 3, it's a clean win for the Bolts.
Let me say, game 1.
Let's go.
Let's go. The most like tame. Let's go.
I can get it. Just go.
Guys, I love listening to him. Look, man, game 1 for the Scarabs, in my mind, some of the best Scarabs play that we've gotten to see this year, maybe the last 2 years. Really, really clean, really efficient, good farm, good fights, everything you would have wanted. Game 2, game 3 have the same Scarabs mistakes and signatures over it that we've seen in past sets and past games. Most of their losses come from very similar things. And again, it's always a little bit different. The scenarios slightly change from each one, but it feels like just permutations on the exact same problem. A lot of it, usually with positioning, sometimes with like trying to save somebody who it's like, if they're out of position, there are certain times where you have to make the call where it's, I'm sorry, they're just gonna die, and things like that. We get to see that in mid. Admittedly, things were already going wrong for the Scarabs by that point this game, but the Bolts got to take that and turn it into a lot more, which otherwise could have been at least, you know, slowed down and maybe matched.
And with that, we got the expected Game 3 set out of the Solar Scarabs, the Olympus Bolts, but at this time, it goes over to the Olympus Bolts. Congratulations to them for finding their win. That's us on the desk, or that's us on the cast. We'll throw it over to the guys on the desk.
That's right, we get the expected set length. When you get the Solar Scarabs playing, you got to assume it's going 3. Unfortunately, the result also follows history, and the Olympus Bolts able to take Game 3 and the set over the Solar Scarabs. Scarabs got it all figured out in game number 1. Game 2, the Bolts were able to answer back, and then game number 3, maybe a bit more contentious, but Myth, the result ends up being the same here, and it's a very convincing win in the last few minutes for the Bolts. Made no mistake once they really built up that lead.
Yeah, it looked to me like a bit of decision-making errors from the Solar Scarabs, specifically around their objective fights. I felt like a couple of times, oh man, the Scarabs are in a really good spot. They can just like group up on the Gold Fury. You've got priority. You've got the ability to just like run it down, at least force the fight into you, like force them into your defensive position. But both times that it happened, especially around that second Gold Fury, I believe, the Solar Scarabs decided, hey, we're in a really good position. Let's stick it to the Bolts. Let's chase them down. Let's go fight in mid. And the Bolts say, oh, word, that's way better for us. Thank you very much. And they're able to turn it around very simply from there. The Olympus Bolts, once they establish their lead, they're able to hold on to it very, very well. I really like the decision-making on when they decided to go for structures as opposed to continually just trying to bolster that lead by moving around the neutral objectives. Ven, of course, has a phenomenal performance, just nearly unkillable with his positioning in some of these team fights, but still capable of putting out that damage as he needs to. And we saw it. If he wasn't the direct threat, if he was just able to walk through tornadoes like he was multiple times in these engagements, only ticking for 90, I think your AMC is going to be in a pretty good spot.
Yeah, you know, relatively, you know, compared to what we have seen in some other matches, you know, tame kills game for both of these squads. Just felt more clinical. LASBRA and Venenu really putting together solid performances here. The Olorun Myth, as you mentioned, it's such a game-changing style of pick. And remember, it's something that the Solar Scarabs had banned out in a couple of the games here in this set. They didn't want BaRRaCCuDDa to play the magical ADCs, the Olorun specifically, the Sanctified Field. Just such a solid pick here. In the Boltsmith, this is how you want to start off the second wave of games here in this phase. You're able to get some momentum going. The rest of your phase is always going to get it started off on a great note. Now we've talked a lot about BaRRa, LASBRA, Ven, the whole squad. Awesome Jake is the one who's with me for the post-game interview.
Hello.
Jake, good to have you here.
Glad to be here.
Unfortunately, I'm going to start off with a harsh question. What goes wrong in Game 1 that you guys tried to make some adjustments for in Game 2?
You know, I was just on the Khepri. You know, not really a god that gets in there. Don't really consider myself a bug boy.
No.
Yeah, more of a undead Chinese general.
You know. I was going to ask, you feel you can get in there more on the, you feel you can get more active on the Xing Chen.
Yeah, you got a lot of jumps, you know, a lot more fun.
Well, look, you guys get a good win here over the Solar Scarabs. Next weekend, you're going up against the Jade Dragons. Now, we saw unique play styles out of them today. We saw some role swaps, things like that. Lane swaps in particular. Is that anything the Olympus Bolts have experimented with? You picking up the Xing Chen, taking it over to solo lane anytime soon?
We're pretty vanilla Andes at the end of the day. You know, we don't really role swap that much. But yeah.
Is that a saying?
Vanilla Andes?
Yeah,
nah, it'd be like vanilla Vinnies, but you know, I'm nervous because like I'm on air, you know, so.
Yeah, fair enough. There is an Andes like custard down the street, and we'll just say that that's what we're talking about. Vanilla Andes. Good enough, Jake. Well, look, congrats on the win. really got in there on the undead Chinese general and liked how it looked. Best of luck in your next set. And thanks for the time.
Yeah.
Olympus Bolts 3-game set win over the Solar Scarabs. What?
Jake is like, if you could amalgamate Twitch chat into an actual human being, like a homunculus of Twitch chat that also just happened to frag out in the battleground, that's who he is. He's a Twitch chat Andy.
You know how I know that's not true? Actually, no, I was about to be very mean to Twitch chat. Never mind. Let's take a look at the 3 remaining sets that we've got this weekend. We've got the Oni Warriors versus the Solar Scarabs right back in action tomorrow morning. And then the Valhalla Valkyries, Camelot Kings. And our weekend finalized by the Tartarus Titans versus the Atlantis Leviathans. And with this win, Myth, the Olympus Bolts bring themselves just 1 win shy of the Camelot Kings, who are on top of the standings. Remember, both teams lost to the Leviathans, and the Bolts lost to the Kings, and that's the big difference maker here moving forward in the second part of the phase. So again, still parity as far as top 6 versus bottom 2, but the Solar Scarabs starting to catch up, try to keep some pace. I think a big set for them tomorrow against the Oni Warriors. A winnable set that makes the Oni Warrior standings looks pretty different as well. Now, I do want to get your thoughts, Myth, before we end up closing the show here. Tartarus Titans, what panic level? Are we at threat level midnight with this squad yet? I mean, it's a team that feels like they'll 2-0 ya or they'll get 2-0'd. What's the concern factor? And we're going to see them tomorrow close out the week against the Leviathans.
Regular season Tartarus Titans are not the Tartarus Titans that you see during events. That my concern level for the team as a whole, incredibly low. I feel like they are a squad that really step up once the stakes start to get a little bit higher. Almost like an inverse. The Camelot Kings regular phase, like just a super dominant team, but don't quite have that next like amp level once they get to lands.
Yeah.
I think the Tartarus Titans are like the inverse of that.
Man, Twig is watching broadcast on stream as well. He's probably going in on you. You just made his fraud tier list, but call it like you see it.
I am
you standing
a fraud.
by it? Fair enough, Myth. I'll let you. If you say it yourself, no one else can say it about you. My name's Dolson. That's been Mifflin on behalf of us, all the other casters, everyone back in production. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern Time.